Chapter 151, Third Person's POV. Peter entered the hideout and went straight to Gwen's lab, where he found Lizzie sitting on a table and Gwen extracting blood from her arm. "So, you guys just have this secret hideout? Cool. Although I'm a bit hurt I wasn't included," Lizzie said, still looking around. "Well, it's a secret hideout for a reason. It wouldn't just be a hideout if everyone knew about it," Peter answered. Lizzie just pouted. "I guess that's fair. So, what were you able to find out?" Harry, who was next to Lizzie, asked a bit worried. "Based on the initial skin I had Arya give her, she is covered in a considerable amount of microwave radiation." "Huh? Does that mean I'm a human microwave?" Lizzie muttered, a bit disappointed. "Hey, what's your power?" "Oh, me. I'm just a human microwave," she mocked. "Microwave, not an actual microwave. And isn't microwave radiation really cancerous?" Harry asked. "What?" Lizzie exclaimed, looking around with worry. "I produce cancer. I'm like a cancer-producing machine. I don't want these powers then, I don't want to give people cancer," Lizzie said as she began freaking out. "Calm down, cancer only develops after long exposure to it. You just received your abilities, you aren't in any danger just yet," Gwen reassured her. "Really?" she asked, still a bit frightened by her own ability. Gwen just nodded. "If your ability is what I think it is, then you have pretty powerful potential. Just what are these microwaves?" Lizzie asked curiously. "Microwaves are a type of electromagnetic radiation, similar to visible light but with longer wavelengths and lower energy," Gwen explained. "They're used in various applications, like cooking food in a microwave oven and in communication technologies like cell phones and Wi-Fi. They also come from natural sources, like stars and the sun. When stars, including our sun, emit light and heat, they also emit electromagnetic radiation across a wide spectrum, including microwaves. Your powers generate microwave radiation, which can heat objects by making water molecules vibrate, creating heat. While it's true that prolonged exposure to high levels of microwave radiation can be harmful, the way you use your powers can be controlled and directed. As long as you manage your abilities properly, you won't be a danger to yourself or others. It's like how X-rays or UV rays can be harmful in large doses but are useful in controlled settings." Lizzie started to relax. "I see, I think I understand. Although using energy from the sun and the stars sounds pretty badass, definitely much better than being a human microwave," she said with a smirk. She then turned towards Peter. "So you're Spider-Man, huh? The one and only." "Disappointed?" Peter said teasingly. "A bit. I expected him to be older, like in his early to mid-20s, not the same age as I am," Lizzie said before turning to Gwen, who was examining her blood. "And so naturally, you're Ghost Spider. You know I always knew you were a blonde." "You have eyes, congrats," Gwen said sarcastically. Lizzie rolled her eyes. "I meant the Ghost Spider. I knew that whoever was behind that mask had to be a blonde. Because of her ice abilities, right?" Peter asked as he looked towards Gwen teasingly. Lizzie nodded. "Definitely because of the ice abilities. Wait a minute." Everyone turned to look at her in confusion. Lizzie turned towards Harry with her mouth slightly agape. "It just hit me now, you really are Nightwing. My boyfriend is a superhero. My boyfriend is freaking Nightwing." Harry just looked at her in confusion. "That's like one of the first things I told you." "I know, but I'm just now processing the information after calming down from being on literal fire. I can confidently say I am Nightwing's girl. Can you get any hotter?" Peter scoffed as he rolled his eyes, looking at Harry's embarrassed expression. After a while, Gwen was done with her research. "So here's what I was able to find out: she is able to manipulate and generate microwaves. Her resistance to her own abilities is really strong, it's close to her having immunity itself, so it will be dangerous for her if she uses a lot of her power without taking breaks and letting all of the radiation accumulate. From what I was able to gather, she could use her power for 24 hours before the radiation starts getting to her, and she will need to release all the radiation. If we want to really train her powers, I recommend the VR capsule. She would be able to train without it affecting her body or those around her." Gwen gave her the rundown. "Harry, since she's your girlfriend, I'll leave her training to you to take care of," Peter said. Harry nodded in understanding. Sure, I don't mind. Are you guys going to train me to be a superhero? Lizzie asked, looking at them in confusion. Not unless you want to. If that's what you want to do, then sure, Peter shrugged. We can be like a superhero couple, Lizzie said as she looked at Harry with stars in her eyes, both kicking ass and saving the day together, she said while doing karate chops. Liz, we take being a superhero very seriously. It's not going to be just fun and games, Harry said with a serious expression. Liz smiled. If that's true, I can see why you are doing a fantastic job. And don't worry, I understand more than I was letting on. You protect people, you keep the streets safe. Lizzie grabbed his hands as she continued to smile. As your girlfriend, I think it's only right that I join you in your dangerous adventures. Harry just kissed the top of her head. All right then, we'll add hero training to your regimen as well. Gwen then turned towards Peter. We're going to be late to the internship. We should hurry. Oh shoot, you're right. Harry, like I said, I leave her to you. If you need anything, just ask Arya. After Peter and Gwen said their goodbyes, they made their way towards the Baxter building. They both turned invisible and swung their way there. As they entered, Johnny looked up and had an excited look. Pete, you're here, great. Really love the enthusiasm, but I have a girlfriend, sorry, Peter said, acting really apologetically. Johnny rolled his eyes. No, you idiot, I want you to listen to this. Gwen didn't stick around and went straight to Susan's office, while Johnny jumped inside his car and turned it on. The engine let out a loud roar while Johnny stuck his head out and looked at Peter. So what do you think? Peter let out a whistle. That sounds crispy. Johnny laughed as he heard that. See, I knew you'd understand. None of the others understand the beauty of such a sound. Are you finally going to take it out for a spin? Nah, not yet anyways. I need to make some adjustments before this baby can hit the road. After they discussed back and forth for a while, Peter went and joined Reed and Ben. You're here just in time, Reed said as he looked towards Peter. Do you think you can manage to build the detector? I already designed it. The plans are on the desk. Yeah, don't worry, I got it, Peter said as he began to work. He had goggles with multiple lenses on as he used a soldering iron. Occasionally, steam would rise, and Peter would blow it away and continue working. All the while, Ben and Reed both continued working on the portal behind him. Peter and Gwen were walking back to their lab casually. Peter had his arm over Gwen as she leaned her head against him. What are we going back to our lab for? Normally, we would just walk home after all of this, Gwen asked. The serum. We haven't had the chance to take it. This is the perfect opportunity. Oh right, I forgot about that. Just then, two men jumped out of an alley with their knives out. Come on, no one has to get hurt. Just give us your valuables. Peter and Gwen turned to look at each other in surprise before they began laughing together. The second guy looked at them strangely. I don't think you understand the situation you're in, he said, lifting his shirt slightly to reveal his gun. I see your watches. You guys must be loaded. Out of everyone you could have robbed, you chose to rob us. You guys are so unlucky, Peter shook his head. I almost pity you guys, Gwen said, shaking her head. The guy with the gun pulled it out and cocked it. We'll ask you one more time, his friend with the knife nudged him. Yo, take a closer look at the chick. She's pretty hot. Why don't we just kill this fool and, he said suggestively. Peter heard this and sighed. Come on, just when we were having fun, you had to go and ruin it. Peter took his arm off Gwen and casually walked toward him. Seeing Peter approach, the man swung his knife. Peter broke his wrist, causing him to scream in pain, then swept his legs, taking him off his feet. The knife was still in the air as Peter caught it and aimed it right at his eyes. Now then, care to repeat that? What were you going to do with my girl? Peter asked coldly. The man just continued crying, holding his broken wrist. Pete, that's enough, Gwen sighed. When Peter turned towards Gwen, he found the man with the gun on all fours while she casually sat on him with her legs crossed and her chin resting on her palm. Peter scoffed and flipped the knife in the air, catching it by the blade side and knocking the man unconscious. Gwen stopped resting her chin and sent 2 fingers to the back of the man's neck, knocking him unconscious. After they called the cops, they began walking away. Gwen smirked and jumped on Peter's back. She had a smile on her face as she put her face next to his. You know I'm more than capable of taking care of myself. Peter only scoffed as he turned his head away. Gwen chuckled as she kicked her feet slightly. I can't say I don't love your overprotective nature, she said, kissing him on the cheek. My girl, huh? You big cornball. Gwen laughed as she saw his ears turn slightly red. Who knew my big overprotective man could get so easily embarrassed, she teased. Peter covered his face. Please stop, he said, embarrassed, which caused Gwen to continue laughing. Now then, onward, my valiant knight, our castle awaits us. You are never going to drop this, are you? Peter asked in resignation. Nope. I'm your girl. How can I possibly stop this, she said, hugging his neck. Immediately after they arrived, they went straight to Gwen's lab. Here, she said, handing him the injection pistols. Shouldn't we do this in bed? Peter asked. You're right, let's, Gwen nodded. They went to their room and did a little cheer with the injection pistols. Here's to love, here's to honor. If you can't come in her, come on her, Peter said before injecting it into his vein, though with a bit of difficulty due to his tough skin. Gwen, who had just injected herself with the serum, looked at Peter in shock and confusion. Wait, what the hell did you just say? She didn't receive an answer as her eyes rolled back, and she fainted alongside Peter. Chapter 152, Third Person's POV. Scarlet Spider was saying goodbye to her new friend while Peter and Gwen walked home from their internship. It was nice meeting the two of you, she said, patting the heads of two little boys standing behind Anastasia's leg. Come on, you two, say bye properly, Anastasia encouraged, holding their heads gently. Blushing, the boys said their goodbyes in Russian before rushing back into their new home, causing both women to laugh. So, are you going to be all right settling in? It's a big change, after all, Scarlet Spider asked curiously. Anastasia nodded. Actually, before leaving, S.H.I.E.L.D. offered me a job as one of their agents. I was thinking of accepting. Sounds like a great opportunity. You should take it. Now, I guess I should get going. I've overstayed my welcome. Anastasia hugged her. Nonsense. Visit whenever you want. After their hug and goodbyes, Scarlet Spider climbed to a rooftop. Now come to Mama, she whispered. Spiders began to surround her. The ones with cameras, line up in front of me, she ordered. The spiders obeyed, and she began collecting the cameras from their small bodies. Thank you, little cuties. Now go rest and do what spiders do. Wait for my call. Yes, our Spider Queen, they said with reverence before scattering. Scarlet Spider shook her head in amusement and turned invisible, heading home. She snuck in through her window, undid her invisibility and spider outfit, and took a shower before dressing in a tank top and shorts. Sitting on her bed, she organized the photos she had received while eating a snack. After nearly an hour, she uploaded the selected photos to a flash drive. Dressed once more, she jumped out the window and froze. Scratching her eyebrow, she muttered, there was absolutely no need for me to do that. I could have just used the door. She hurried to the Daily Bugle, which was still open despite the late hour. MJ printed the photos and asked Betty, is Mr. Jameson in his office? He ever even leaves the place? Betty scoffed. But you can enter, he's just talking to the other intern. He's here. Isn't it pretty late? Betty gave her a deadpan look, causing MJ to feel embarrassed. Right, sorry. I'll let myself in. Inside, she heard Jameson yelling, come on, kid. You could have skipped school and gotten me better pictures. I want pictures of them fighting, not the aftermath. We need evidence. Excuse me, MJ interrupted. I actually skipped school to get these pictures. Can I get a note to excuse my absence? Jameson motioned for her to hand him the pictures. As he looked at them, he laughed. Now this is what I'm talking about. You should learn a thing or two from her, Jerry. This is dedication. She risked her education and got me these marvelous photos. It's Eddie, Eddie retorted, annoyed. And you can still use my pictures. Just put them side by side with hers and show the effects of what they left behind. Jameson rubbed his chin. I see what you mean. I'm so glad I thought of this. Eddie's lip twitched at Jameson's shamelessness. He turned to MJ, who was trying not to laugh. So, can I get my excused absence note? You'll get more than that, young lady. These pictures deserve a bonus. I almost thought I'd have to use these useless photos for tomorrow's paper. There's no need to diss my photos. If you don't want them, I'll take them somewhere else. Stop being a big baby, I still need them. Jameson waved Eddie off. Betty, give Mary Jane a bonus on her way out and a note excusing her absence on my behalf. Now shoo, you two. I have a paper to write. MJ rolled her eyes and received what she needed. Eddie, walking next to her, scoffed. Why is he like that? And how come he remembers your name and not mine? Mine's easier to remember. Excuse me. MJ raised an eyebrow. I didn't mean anything bad by it, Eddie apologized. You seriously don't realize what he was doing. Huh. In his weird, asshole way, he was trying to be a mentor and teach you something. Huh. Are we talking about the same guy? What was he trying to teach? How to be an ass? MJ scoffed in amusement. No, he wanted to show you that those who get the job done and well get recognition, while those who don't even try won't have their names remembered. And I'll ask you again, are you sure we're talking about the same person? As they got outside, it was turning dark. Come on, I'll walk you home. It's getting dark. Huh? Why would you do that? MJ asked, confused. MJ, like Peter, was completely oblivious when people were hitting on her. Unfortunately, she was even more oblivious than Peter. Come on, you don't really expect me to be okay with letting someone as beautiful as you be alone when it's getting dark. Who knows what kind of creeps you might encounter. I appreciate the compliment and the gesture, but I can take care of myself perfectly fine. I didn't take self-defense classes for nothing. Men are much stronger. His words were cut short as MJ aimed her foot right at his temple, stopping an inch away. Eddie stood there, stunned, while MJ smiled and walked away with a skip in her step. Like I said, don't worry. As she walked away, Eddie held his camera and secretly took a picture of her. MJ's spidey senses tingled. She looked back in confusion and saw Eddie smiling at his camera. She shrugged and walked away. My liking towards her is definitely developing into a crush. Her confident smile was so beautiful. Nearly an hour later, Peter and Gwen awoke with their bodies aching. Ah! They both screamed, holding their eyes. Arya, shut off the lights. With the lights off, they blinked a few times. All right, what is going on? Gwen asked. I think the SSS upgraded the spider DNA in our systems. We might have developed night vision since I can see you perfectly even though it's pitch black in here. Whoa, that's cool. I wonder what else we can do, Gwen mused. I wonder that too, but first, let's take a shower. I'm so sweaty, it's a bit gross. Heh, I understand. Wanna go together? Did the SSS also upgrade your libido? You don't want to. Now I never said that. Who am I to miss such an opportunity? After showering, having some shower sex, and showering again, they dressed in training clothes and sat in the dark training room. Let's have Arya do a quick scan, Peter suggested, and Gwen agreed. After their scans, Arya reported, there are some things these scans can't show, like how they've affected your senses. But I can tell you that the spider DNA inside you has indeed gotten stronger, causing you to develop new abilities and upgrades. Let's start with the typical abilities. Everything has been upgraded by at least 2 times. You can now lift 200 tons. Your muscles are more compact, making them heavier and stronger, which means increased durability. You are now effectively bulletproof. Normal bullets will bounce right off, and high-caliber bullets will cause a regular bullet wound at most. You should now be faster than the speed of sound. Congratulations, your tendons are like rubber, allowing you to twist and turn into impossible positions, making you very flexible. The spinnerets in your forearms, responsible for your organic webbing, have been upgraded. You can now produce acidic webbing. Your bioelectricity has strengthened, burning brighter or colder based on who I'm talking to. Your camouflage ability has also improved, you should be able to turn objects you're holding invisible as well. It's more durable, allowing you to take hits while invisible without losing your camouflage. Finally, all your senses have been upgraded twice over. What you can do with them, I can only infer. I see, so that's what's upgraded. What did we receive that's new? I can tell there are things in my body that weren't there before, Peter said, looking at his arms. Gwen nodded in agreement. She extended her arms, and from the top of her wrists, long bone claws shot up, splattering the floor with blood and causing her to wince. From the side of Peter's wrists, 2 long bone claws appeared on each wrist. Shit, does Felicia have to deal with this pain every time? They're sick though, I'll give you that, he said. Their bone claws retracted back into their bodies as the holes they created immediately closed. Arya then said, as you can see, you have developed retractable bone claws. You also have retractable fangs, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. Gwen, who was sitting on the ground, leaned back on her hands and looked at Peter teasingly. She opened her mouth slightly, and the 4 fangs elongated. She looked up and licked one of her fangs before biting down. You naughty, naughty girl, Peter said in a Nigerian accent, wiggling his finger at her. Peter then pulled the side of his cheek with his middle finger and showed his teeth, smirking at her, which caused them both to laugh. Are they venomous? Like, do they have paralytic poison? Peter asked. No, and neither are your bone claws. They are just there, Arya responded. Cool, so I just turned into a carnivore, Peter said sarcastically. Now then, what else? Gwen asked as she was standing up. As she did, Peter spread his legs a bit. She looked at him in confusion. How did you know I was just going to sit in your lap? I was just standing up. Yo, this is so trippy since I just saw an image of you doing it. To me, it appeared like a flip book. I saw you standing up, walking towards me, and plopping down right inside my legs. The images of you were faded though. Cool, Gwen said as she sat between his legs. So, do you have some kind of foresight? Yup. I wonder, do you have the same thing as I do? Let's see. Gwen said as she closed her eyes and focused on her spidey senses. Whoa. I don't have foresight, but I do have some type of clairvoyance. I can see what's happening in the streets outside. My spidey senses are painting a picture in my head, and we're pretty deep underground. Hey, young disciple, it appears you have opened your third eye, Peter teased, causing Gwen to chuckle. Tell me, have you guys ever heard of the Laplace demon theory? Arya suddenly asked. Yup. Nope, Peter and Gwen said, respectively. Peter explained, the Laplace demon is a theoretical creature that, if it knows the position and motion of everything, can predict where everything would move next and thus predict the future. Correct, Arya said seriously. Take that theory and add your abilities, not just your spidey senses, but your chi abilities as well. Let's take Dad's spidey senses and electric chi as an example. Dad, your spidey senses take into account everything in their surroundings, while your electricity is energy that pushes everything forward. That's how I believe your foresight came to be. Now for Mom, it's more difficult to guess. But I believe, just like Dad's, your spidey senses notice everything. Here's where it gets tricky. I think your spidey senses take the concept of spreading from your ice-based chi and add it to them, making your spidey senses spread further than they would normally, giving you clairvoyance on a larger scale, if that makes sense. Chapter 153, Third Person's POV. Peter and Gwen then decided to test out their senses, trying to see if they had developed something new. Peter looked at Gwen with his mouth agape, clearly excited about something. Gwen just looked at him strangely. What? I have X-ray. Huh. Peter just covered his mouth and made an expression as if he was about to cry tears of joy. I have some type of X-ray vision. This is the greatest day of my life. Gwen blushed as she covered her chest since he was still staring at her. You pervert. It isn't anything I've never seen, Peter said with a smirk. Gwen just narrowed her eyes at him and focused. Huh, oh wow, this is cool. I have some sort of infrared vision, but I really have to focus on it, otherwise, it will flicker away. It's like it's turning on and off. I get what you mean. Nice tits though. Gwen smacked him across the arm. If you can stop being a pervert for just a few minutes, I would very much appreciate it. I have X-ray vision and invisibility. All I need is time stop, and I would be golden. The heavenly trio. Gwen's expression turned cold. You're disgusting. Too far. Gwen only nodded, causing Peter to look apologetic as he rubbed the back of his head. Sorry, I'll stop. Gwen rolled her eyes and shook her head. You're so lucky I love you and understand your dark and twisted humor. Peter laid down on her lap and buried his face by her stomach. I guess I am lucky to have such an amazing and understanding girlfriend, he said, looking up at her with puckered lips for a kiss. Gwen rolled her eyes as she held his face and moved his hair away from his eyes. She gave him a quick kiss. Now come on, Mr. Pervert, we have to train our new abilities. What? Is that all I'm getting? That's all you deserve for that little joke, Mr. Pervert. Is that what you're just going to keep calling me from now on? Peter sighed as he reluctantly got up. Yup. Now come on, capsule time, Gwen said, happily marching away. Peter shook his head and followed after her. When they entered the capsule, they spent a few hours training how to properly control their new strength, which surprisingly wasn't that hard for them. Their experience in martial arts had given them amazing control over their bodies and muscles, allowing them to control their strength just as they used to before taking the SSS. Afterward, they were able to control their senses, which were still heightened. Everything felt sensitive to them, they could even feel changes in the wind with their skin. If they shut off all their other senses, they could faintly hear each other's heartbeat, but only from close proximity. Arya developed a scenario where they had to find and track down a killer using just their heightened sense of smell. As for their taste, Arya developed a scenario where they were in a cooking competition and had to win using their enhanced taste buds. This actually helped them both become really good cooks. After training to properly control and use their new senses, they moved on to training with their new bone claws. Peter and Gwen stood face to face in an empty white room. Gwen spread her arms out, and from the tops of her wrists, long bone claws appeared on both hands. She took a step forward and leaned towards Peter, smiling widely and exposing her fangs. Peter crossed his arms, and from the sides of his wrists, 2 bone claws appeared on each hand. Peter then swiped his arms to the side and grinned savagely, exposing his own fangs. They both hissed at each other before they started laughing, amused and entertained by their own actions. Ha ha ha, okay, for real now, Peter chuckled. He, you're right, Gwen said as they both got into fighting positions. Their faces turned serious as they narrowed their eyes at each other. With a burst of blinding speed, they ran towards each other. Peter and Gwen collided with a loud clash of bone on bone, their claws locking in a fierce struggle for dominance. Peter's superior strength began to push Gwen back, but she twisted gracefully, using her agility to slip out of his grasp and swipe at his side. Peter felt the sting of her claws as they raked across his ribs, drawing blood. Grunting in pain, Peter retaliated with a swift backhand slash, catching Gwen across the arm. Blood seeped from the gash, but she barely flinched, her eyes burning with determination. She spun around, delivering a rapid series of strikes aimed at Peter's chest and shoulders. Peter blocked most of them, but a few got through, leaving shallow cuts. Gwen took advantage of the brief opening to leap back and catch her breath. She wiped the blood from her arm, her expression one of fierce resolve. Not bad, she taunted, a wild gleam in her eyes. You're pretty quick, Peter replied, his voice strained but steady. But I'm not done yet. With a roar, Peter charged forward again, his claws flashing in a deadly arc. Gwen ducked and weaved, her movements a blur, but Peter's relentless assault began to wear her down. A lucky swipe caught her across the thigh, causing her to stumble. Seizing the opportunity, Peter lunged forward, tackling Gwen to the ground. They grappled fiercely, rolling across the floor in a flurry of claws and teeth. Both were bleeding from multiple wounds, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. With a final surge of strength, Peter managed to pin Gwen beneath him, his claws poised at her throat. Gwen, panting heavily, met his gaze with a fierce glare, but she did not struggle further. Will you look at that, babes? It appears it's my win, Peter said smugly. Gwen sighed, her body relaxing slightly. Yeah, you got me, she admitted, a faint smile tugging at her lips. But don't think I'll go easy on you next time. Peter grinned, retracting his claws and offering her a hand to help her up. Wouldn't expect anything less. But did we have to fight without our spidey senses and with lower strength and stamina? These cuts hurt, you know, Gwen whined. I'm just doing it in case we ever come across a villain that can disable our spidey senses or lower our strength. We wouldn't be helpless then if that time came, Peter explained. I guess you have a point, Gwen sighed. All of their cuts then healed within seconds. Oh shoot, I forgot about our healing factor. It probably has gotten stronger and upgraded again. Wait a minute. Hey, Gwen, can I try something with you? Peter asked. Gwen was confused. Sure. Peter put a hand near her stomach and closed his eyes. Gwen just looked at Peter in confusion, her eyes widening as she was sent flying back, tumbling in the air before skipping along the ground. She stopped herself with her hand and looked at Peter in surprise. What the hell was that for? Peter just looked at his hands in awe. Want to know what I just used to do that? What? Gwen asked, confused as she stood up and dusted herself off. My wall climbing abilities. Peter said with a big smile. Gwen had a look of surprise. How? You have to teach me how to do that, she said in awe. You remember how our wall climbing abilities work, right? Gwen immediately figured it out. You're using your now powered bioelectricity to change the electrostatic force that causes the van der Waals force, right? Peter nodded with a smirk. It was easy for me to do with my familiarity with electricity. All I did was reverse them. So instead of making things stick together, it pushes them away. I think I can even supercharge it to the point where I can weaponize the air itself. Ah, so that means I wouldn't be able to do it? Gwen asked sadly, thinking it was really cool. Actually, you should be able to since you can wall stick to things. It just won't be as powerful as what I can supercharge, but it should still be pretty powerful. It will require really hard training since you aren't as familiar with electrostatic forces as I am. Yes. Gwen pumped her fist. Well, what are we waiting for? Start training me, Sensei, Gwen said, putting her fist to her palm. Peter chuckled and pretended to rub his imaginary beard. My young disciple, this course takes discipline. Are you sure you're up for the task? He said, aging his voice. Yes, I am, Master, she winked. Seducing your master is a large taboo, Peter continued, both of them playing around for a bit before they both got serious. After their training, they decided to call it a day since they weren't getting anywhere. Gwen found it much harder than she thought. Afterwards, Gwen decided to head home since it was getting pretty late and she felt bad about making her dad eat dinner by himself. Peter decided to stay a bit longer. He went to his main workshop and sat down. All right, Arya, show me what you were able to find about S.H.I.E.L.D. A holographic image of Arya appeared. She then pretended to sit on Peter's lap as she pulled out a large tablet from out of nowhere. There is a lot we need to go through, but first I will tell you the 3 things I believe you are going to want to know most of all. First of all, S.H.I.E.L.D. is currently being taken over by Hydra agents. Although they are hard to find and barely leave a trail, I had to dig deep to even find information on it. But it appears that some agents are actually sleeper agents. Arya then stopped and looked at Peter in surprise. You don't look surprised. I mean, it should be obvious they have taken over S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. was one of the reasons they were taken down last time. So is it safe to say that they would take over the one thing that can stop them? Isn't it obvious? Why wouldn't you take control of something that has stopped you from accomplishing your goals before? Plus, it's actually a really smart thing to do since they would be able to hide evidence of their existence much better and more efficiently, Peter explained. Arya nodded in understanding. I see you understood that much. It's no wonder you aren't surprised. And to be fair, they are literally everywhere you turn, so I can see why you weren't surprised. And the other things? Peter asked. Ah, Grandpa Ben was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and one with a high clearance level at that. He was recruited from the army due to his achievements and skills. What? Peter shouted in surprise. He then put a hand on his chin and began to ponder. What's wrong? Arya asked. Some things I remember from my childhood are starting to make much more sense if I think about them differently. Like what? Arya asked curiously. After my parents died, Uncle Ben would stay out a lot and always be at work. I always assumed he was grieving the loss of his brother, my father, and was using work as a distraction and a way to earn more money since he had to take care of me now as well. But if he was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, that changes things. Arya, can you check when Uncle Ben became more active as an agent? Let's see. It was after the death of your parents. From what I was able to find, he was looking everywhere for the cause of their deaths. Based on the information recorded on his file, he felt there was more to it than their boss simply killing them and wanted to get to the bottom of it. He then stopped completely and dropped out of S.H.I.E.L.D. around your 7th birthday. On his file, it has a quote of something he said when he decided to quit. Reason for quitting: my little nephew is growing up and becoming more and more of a troublemaker. If I don't keep my eyes on him, who knows what he would blow up. He already destroyed my microwave trying to build a time machine. Arya just turned and stared at Peter with a look that said, really, as he covered his face in embarrassment. I honestly believed I could do it. Okay. Don't judge me. I thought I could put an item inside and send it to the future, and then my future self would be able to send me things back as well. I thought I could build anything I thought of if I just put my mind to it. Please stop giving me that judging look. Arya just patted his shoulders. You are something else, Daddy. Never change, never change. Let's just move on, okay? He, if you say so. Arya then sighed as her expression turned serious. As for the last thing. I thought you would want to know that Felix Hardy, father of Felicia Hardy, has been in the custody of S.H.I.E.L.D. What? Peter asked once again in surprise as he looked at Arya. Please let me finish. There's more, and it isn't very good news. He was in their custody for trying to steal from them. A few months later, he broke himself out. He was a pretty famous thief known throughout the underworld as the Black Cat. His skills were so good that even S.H.I.E.L.D. had tried to recruit him. They wanted to use his skills for good. But they were declined as Felix Hardy was more of a free spirit, a wanderer if you will. After breaking out, he began snooping around them. That's when he accidentally stumbled across Hydra. This was something I was able to find only after accessing files from places apart from S.H.I.E.L.D. Here, take a look. It wasn't a video. It was just a blurry picture. It was a man wearing black in a feline position standing in front of a man with long hair, a black mouth cover, and a metal arm with a red star on it. Peter just stared with his eyes widening as he looked at the picture. From what I've been able to gather and infer, he is known as the Winter Soldier. He's like Hydra's boogeyman. No one this man has gone after has been able to escape and make it out alive. So it's safe to assume Felix Hardy has been killed by none other than the Winter Soldier. Spider-Man 154, third person's POV. Spider-Man was seen swinging through the rainy night, causing him to sigh. Of course it would be raining, he grumbled. On his way to Felicia, Spider-Man stopped a few incidents, mostly preventing car crashes and mishaps due to the wet and slippery ground. Spider-Man landed on the railing of a fire escape directly outside Felicia's window. He tapped the side of his ear, causing his helmet to retract and stay on as a metal chin guard. Peter peered inside, seeing Felicia sitting on her bed with books scattered around her, doing homework. He noticed her push a strand of hair behind her ear. She was wearing a large black sweater. Peter took a deep breath to mentally prepare for their conversation. He knocked on her window, and she jumped slightly in surprise, looking up in confusion. Peter fogged up the window with his breath and wrote, "Hi," in the condensation. Felicia scoffed in amusement, opened the window, and saw his now wet hair clinging to his face. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, you know. I was just patrolling the neighborhood and decided to drop by and say hello." Felicia leaned against the window, looking at him with an expression that said she didn't believe him. "Aha. What do you want, Pete?" "I'm kind of busy with homework." "Huh. You still do that?" "I just gave it to Arya to handle for me. I haven't done a single piece of homework since middle school." Felicia shrugged. "I just do it to keep myself busy. I'll get bored otherwise. Anyway, do you want to come in? You're going to get sick if you stay in the rain." "I can't get sick, but I'll still take you up on that offer." "Right, forgot, sorry, habits. Just don't get my floor wet." As Spider-Man entered, he closed the window and the curtains behind him. When he turned around, Felicia was in front of him with a towel, drying his hair. "What are you doing? What does it look like?" "Drying you. You're the idiot who decided to take his helmet off and get wet. I found your father." Peter blurted out suddenly. Felicia froze, her hand resting on Peter's head with the towel. She lowered her hands to his cheeks, lifting his head to look at her. Her expression was serious as she asked, "What are you talking about?" Peter looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "I had Arya access all the information S.H.I.E.L.D. had. One piece of that information was that your father was once in S.H.I.E.L.D. custody for trying to steal information from them." Felicia turned Peter's head, forcing him to look at her. "Are you saying my father is in S.H.I.E.L.D. custody? Is that where he's been this entire time?" Peter decided to brave it and look Felicia in the eyes. He saw her eyes begin to water as she bit her lip. "Your dad was really skilled. They even tried to recruit him. He actually managed to break free and escape their custody." "Peter," she sobbed, "why are you so scared to tell me the rest? What is it that you're not telling me?" "Arya found out S.H.I.E.L.D. was infested with Hydra agents. They were secretly running S.H.I.E.L.D. Your father had the misfortune of discovering that. Once he did, Hydra sent someone after him, someone to take him out." Felicia gripped Peter's suit and pressed her forehead against his chest. Peter saw her shoulders trembling. "Are you," she choked out, her voice trembling, "saying my daddy was killed? Please. Please tell me you're lying." Peter couldn't say anything as Felicia continued, "He can't be dead. My dad is one slippery bastard. He's probably hiding out somewhere until it's safe," she said, looking up at Peter with her tear-streaked face. Peter turned his wrist, projecting a holographic picture Arya had found. "This was the last picture Arya was able to find of your father." Felicia reached for his wrist with shaky hands. "Who is that? Who is that against my father? He is known as the Winter Soldier, Hydra's exterminator. No one who the Winter Soldier has gone up against has ever made it out alive. He's like an urban myth that no one truly believes in. From what Arya and I were able to gather and infer, we believe he's enhanced. Hydra has managed to create an imperfect super soldier serum and used the Winter Soldier as an experiment." Felicia slowly looked up at Peter, tears streaming down her face, her lip quivering. Sobs racked her body as she buried her face in his chest, clutching him tightly. "My daddy, he's really gone," she whispered between sobs. "He can't be. He just can't be." Peter held Felicia as she began sobbing, her hands gripping his back tightly. He could feel her whole body shaking with each sob, her tears soaking into his suit. Peter gently rubbed her back, trying to offer some comfort. Felicia had her head resting on his shoulder as she cried out for her father, her voice breaking with each sob. Peter ran his hand over her head in comfort, his fingers gently threading through her hair. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, his heart aching for her. He held her tighter, wishing there was more he could do to ease her pain. "You're not alone, Felicia. I'm right here." His words seemed to soothe her slightly, but her tears continued to flow. All Peter could do was stay by her side, offering silent support as she grieved. After a few long minutes, Felicia's sobbing began to calm down. She still refused to let go of her grip on Peter, finding solace in his warmth. Her breathing gradually steadied, but she remained nestled against him, drawing strength from his presence. Peter continued to stroke her hair gently, offering silent comfort. "Take your time," he said softly, his voice filled with compassion. He knew she needed this moment to feel safe and supported, and he was more than willing to be there for her, for as long as she needed. After a while, Peter gently laid Felicia down on the bed to rest, but she still clung to him. "Please don't leave me," she mumbled sadly. She knew that if she let go of Peter, she would return to a crying mess. He was her warmth during this time, the time she felt most alone. Peter froze for a moment, then took a deep breath and complied with her wishes. He lay down beside her, wrapping his arms around her as she nestled against him. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered reassuringly, holding her close. "I'm here for you, Felicia." They stayed like that, finding a fragile peace in each other's presence as the night slowly passed. "You know, ever since my dad disappeared, I have always resented him slightly. I always thought he was hiding somewhere because of something he stole but couldn't bring us along. I understood that if that was the case, he was doing it for our own protection, but I always wondered why we couldn't have hidden together with him." Felicia shared, her face buried in Peter's chest. "So, have you always known your father was in the thieving business?" Felicia chuckled. "Yeah, believe it or not, I found out when I was 5. I heard someone breaking in, and being so young, I didn't know any better and went to check it out. I found my dad coming through the window in black spandex with a bag over his shoulders. I remember us just staring awkwardly at each other for a while. Then he said, "Don't tell your mother." She deepened her voice towards the end, chuckling slightly. I feel like if it wasn't for that incident, my father and I wouldn't have been as close as we were. Ever since that day, he taught me all his skills, from fighting to pickpocketing, even how to escape if I was ever tied up. Every time he stole something, the first thing he did was show it to me. It almost became a sort of tradition between us. Obviously, my mother never found out what my father was up to, but I had a feeling she knew or had a clue but chose to keep quiet about it since it brought us close. Not to mention how good the money was and how he got us lavish gifts and took us to fancy, exotic places. Peter had a smile on his face as he listened, while Felicia also had a small smile with a reminiscent but pained look. She then chuckled, "Wanna know something funny? I was the one who came up with the name Black Cat for him. He loved it, and ever since, he used it as his moniker. He would always leave something to tell people it was him who stole whatever it was. Well, that all stopped when I was 12, when he suddenly disappeared," she said, burying her face in Peter's chest once more. "Peter," she called out with a deep sense of sadness in her voice, "I miss him so much," she cried. Peter continued holding her. "I know. From what you told me, the two of you sounded really close. I'm a bit jealous," he said teasingly, trying to make her smile. When she looked up at Peter, tears were rolling down the side of her face. Peter subconsciously wiped her tears away, causing Felicia to lean into his hand and close her eyes. "Thank you for being here with me, Pete. Always." When Felicia opened her eyes, she saw Peter smiling at her with tenderness. Unable to resist, she reached out and placed a hand on his cheek. As Felicia softly caressed his cheek, her touch was tender and soothing. She guided her face closer to Peter's, shifting upward with deliberate slowness. Their lips met in a gentle, affectionate kiss. The kiss was tender and soft, each movement slow and deliberate, creating a quiet, intimate moment. The sound of their kissing was a subtle mingling of soft, fleeting whispers, enhancing the warmth and closeness they shared. As they slowly back away, Felicia had a small blush on her face as she smiled slightly, while Peter just had a look of pure disbelief. "I'm so fucking dead." Chapter 157, Third Person's POV, the next morning. Peter woke up in MJ's arms, both cuddled up against each other. They hadn't done anything more than cuddle, and it was one of the best nights of sleep Peter had ever had. He then felt MJ pat the top of his head. "Come on, Tiger, we need to get up." "Do we have to?" "You feel so nice, I don't want to get up," Peter whined in a muffled voice. "Well, we have a bit of time to waste, so just for a little bit." "Yay," Peter said, snuggling in tighter. MJ just smiled contentedly as she messed with his bed hair. After a few minutes, she patted him on the head again. "Now, come on, we have school to get to." "Boo," Peter said as he reluctantly let go. When he looked at her, he couldn't help but find her messy red hair attractive. "You always did know how to rock bed hair," Peter said with a smirk before kissing the top of her head. MJ ran her fingers through her locks and rolled her eyes. "I know how to rock any hairstyle," she said shamelessly. "Now go, or we're going to be late." "Yes, ma'am," Peter sighed as he headed for her bedroom door. What? MJ was taken by surprise. She expected him to head out the way he came in, which was through the window. "That idiot is trying to embarrass me in front of my mother," MJ grumbled. As Peter headed downstairs, he found MJ's mother in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. "Good morning, Ms. Watson," Peter greeted casually. "Good morning, Peter," Ms. Watson replied just as casually, but then she got a confused look. "Wait, since when were you here?" "Since last night," Peter answered as he headed for the door. "I didn't hear you come in." "I climbed through MJ's window," Peter said as he closed the door behind him. All Ms. Watson could do was sigh. "Teenagers these days are so shameless," she grumbled. When Peter entered his house, he sensed Aunt May in the kitchen. Apparently, she sensed him too, as she peeked her head out. "Oh look, our roommate is here at last." "Ouch," Peter said, putting a hand on his chest. "Sticks and stones, Aunt May, sticks and stones. That's what I'll be hitting you with if you don't hurry and get ready," and then come down to explain why you were absent from school," she said, giving him a stern look. "Right. I forgot about that," Peter grumbled. "The school called, you know, so you better have an explanation. And I don't want to hear it's anything to do with your hero crap." Yeah, I'll explain everything later," Peter sighed as he went to get ready. When he came down, breakfast was ready, and they waited for him. As they all began to eat, Uncle Ben looked at Peter curiously. "What did you do yesterday that made you miss school?" "Oh, you know, the usual. Fought people with animal-based powers, met a pirate spy who took us to his flying invisible ship, where he sent us on a mission. We went and fought an entire military army and won, took down the entire Soviet Union from the inside, hacked into a government-affiliated system, and stole all their information. So, nothing out of the ordinary. By the time we got back, school was already over, so we went to our internship. On our way out, we were mugged, which was fun. Afterward, Gwen and I took some super strong drugs together." There was a heavy silence at the table, the only sound being Peter using his utensils against the plate. When Peter looked up, he just saw Uncle Ben and Aunt May staring at him, their eyes and lips twitching. "So, how was your day? Any crazy adventures you two had without me?" Peter asked with genuine curiosity. Uncle Ben couldn't help but put his utensils down and sighed heavily. "Can't you just have a single normal day for once? Does every day have to be an adventure? Danger is drawn to me, unfortunately. I'm too handsome for my own good." Aunt May just held the bridge of her nose and also sighed. "First things first, are you hurt?" "Emotionally, probably, but physically, I've never been better," Peter shrugged. Actually, I have a question," Peter said, turning towards Uncle Ben. "Does she know?" Peter motioned towards Aunt May. "Huh?" Uncle Ben said, tilting his head in confusion. His eyes then shifted as he went over everything Peter had just said. "My goodness, Peter, you met up with S.H.I.E.L.D. That pirate spy you mentioned is Fury, isn't it?" So she does know." "And yes, it's little Nicky, but I don't think he likes me very much," Peter said with a smirk. "With how you're referring to him, I can see why," Uncle Ben scoffed. "So, I see you also found out I worked for them," he nodded. "How come you never told me you worked as a spy?" "Well, for one, you were a literal child. And two, not having people know what you do is the whole point." Aunt May knew, Peter pouted. "She's my wife," Uncle Ben said with a straight expression. "Anyway, so you hacked into S.H.I.E.L.D. and stole all their information. You know you can get into serious trouble for that," Uncle Ben said with a serious expression. "Well, I'm glad I did it anyway, since I found out Hydra is alive and has taken over S.H.I.E.L.D. without anyone really knowing about it. But, you know, that's here and there." "Slam what?" both Aunt May and Uncle Ben exclaimed, slamming the table and pushing their chairs back as they stood up. "Can you please pass me the maple syrup?" Peter asked calmly, with his hand out. Seeing how they were looking at him with shocked, horrified eyes, Peter sighed. "Fine, I'll get it myself," he muttered as he leaned across the entire table to grab it. "Peter, what do you mean Hydra's alive?" Uncle Ben asked, putting a hand on Peter's shoulder. Peter felt his grip tighten, causing Peter to raise an eyebrow as he looked at his shoulder and then back at Uncle Ben. "Right, sorry," Uncle Ben muttered as he softened his grip. "Well, actually, I've known for a while, even before I hacked into S.H.I.E.L.D. I just found out they took over S.H.I.E.L.D. recently." Both Uncle Ben and Aunt May sat back down and looked at Peter, waiting for him to explain everything. "Well, for starters, I don't have any definite proof, but from everything I've been able to gather, Hydra was the one who killed my mother and father." Peter saw Uncle Ben's mouth clench while Aunt May put a hand over his arm in support. "How did you find out?" Uncle Ben asked. The proof that cemented the idea was something Harry was able to gather. He found out and recorded his father, Norman, talking to someone from Hydra and saying their catchphrase. "I see. And you've known for a while?" Uncle Ben asked curiously. Peter simply nodded. "The reason I didn't tell you both is because you were both normal people, well, to me, anyway. The less you knew, the safer you were." "But didn't Captain America take down Hydra?" "He gave his own life to take them down," Aunt May asked. "They have this crazy motto, take one head off, and two more shall take its place." Cap only took one head of the Hydra while many others lived in hiding so the world wouldn't discover them, Peter explained. Peter pulled out his phone. Here, Arya, pull up what we've been able to find out about Hydra. A light shone from his phone camera, and holographic projections appeared in front of them. After they began discussing what Peter had discovered, they heard a knock on the door. When he opened it, he found MJ looking at him with a concerned look. Are you okay? We should hurry. Oh, right, I forgot about it. Hold up. Peter went toward Uncle Ben and Aunt May. We'll discuss this later. Bye, love you, he said quickly, taking everything with him. Yeah, sure, Uncle Ben said, plopping down in his seat with a sigh. As they heard the door shut, Aunt May went and kissed Uncle Ben on the cheek. Don't worry, everything will be all right. Don't tell him I told you this since he would never let me hear the end of it, but I believe in Peter. He'll be able to solve what's going on. He's a very smart boy. Uncle Ben just patted her hand. I know, but I'm just worried about him having to deal with everything. He's just a boy, after all. Aunt May smiled. I know, but you seem to have forgotten, he isn't alone in this. He has friends that are just as amazing as him to help him and watch his back. Not to mention he'll have us to come back to when he gets tired of everything and needs time to rest. Uncle Ben kissed her hand. I suppose you're right. Peter was walking with his arm around MJ. Why are you dragging your feet? MJ asked, noticing he was walking slowly. Because I'm terrified of being in the same space with everyone right now, Peter said with an awkward expression. You say that, being who you are. Don't you get into dangerous situations every day? MJ teased. I'd rather face 10 times what I go through every day than face Gwen and Felicia right now. That's not the tiger I know. The tiger I know wouldn't be dodging responsibility right now. This tiger is just a little cub being thrown to the lions, Peter sighed as MJ giggled, both making their way to school. When they arrived, they found Gwen by herself, tapping away on her phone with a bored expression. She noticed them immediately, looked up, shut off her phone, and put it in her back pocket as she leaned against the school gates with her arms crossed. Took you guys long enough. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought everyone was ignoring me. I was talking to Uncle Ben and Aunt May, which took longer than expected, Peter muttered, not daring to look Gwen in the eyes. Did he tell me? Gwen asked MJ. MJ decided to play dumb, looking at Gwen in confusion. Tell me what? You haven't told her. Gwen glared. Peter looked toward MJ with worry. Why are you getting me into more trouble than I already am? MJ just stifled a laugh. Sorry, I wanted to see what she was going to say. Don't worry, he told me everything. MJ joined her hands together. Just please don't get too mad at him. He's already ashamed of what happened and is sorry, she pleaded for Peter's sake. Gwen just scoffed. We'll just have to see how he behaves moving forward. Just then, they saw Felicia moving slowly towards them, taking her time as if she was dreading every step. Hey, guys, Felicia said lightly. Gwen sighed heavily. You know, I expected to be angrier when I saw you. So you guys know. I expected as much, Felicia nodded. Wait, you're not. I'm a bit angry, yes, but not to the point that I dislike you or anything like that, Gwen mumbled. Gwen then sighed once more and hugged Felicia. I'm sorry to hear about your dad. Felicia was taken aback and looked towards Peter and MJ in confusion. Ah, thanks, I guess. I haven't really wrapped my head around it. MJ went and hugged Felicia as well. If you ever want to talk, you can always come to me. Ah, look at this. I love a group hug, Peter said, stretching his arms out. Join in, and I'll rip your balls off, Gwen said. Peter faltered for a bit before shrugging. They'll regrow, he said as he joined in, which caused Gwen to grumble a bit. The students passing by looked at them strangely, giving them weird looks, causing Felicia to turn red in the face. Please stop this. I hate this. People are looking at us. Felicia pleaded. No, Gwen said with a smile. I know how much you hate affection. You deserve this. Think of it as your punishment. Not to mention the embarrassment is an added bonus. Get off me. Please. I learned my lesson. I won't do it again. Felicia kept pleading. MJ and Gwen looked at each other, smiled, and released her. Felicia was holding her knees as she gasped for air. I thought I was going to die. Never do that again. Then don't kiss my boyfriend next time, Gwen scoffed. Touché, Felicia said awkwardly. Peter then looked around in confusion. Where's Harry? I thought he'd be here by now. Gwen shrugged. I don't know. I haven't seen him since I arrived. She then froze and stood with her mouth agape. What? What's wrong? They kept looking at Gwen weirdly when suddenly Peter began to laugh. It wasn't a normal laugh, he was wheezing, holding his stomach. Felicia and MJ just looked at each other before giving him puzzled looks. Gwen put a hand over her forehead and sighed. Jesus Christ. Just then, they saw why she had that reaction. Harry and Lizzie came around a corner, Harry holding Lizzie's arm with a bright red face, while Lizzie was limping with an equally red face. PHTTTTT, Felicia covered her mouth as she leaned against the gate, trying to stop herself. Peter reached into his pockets and pulled out $20, which he handed to Felicia, who happily snatched it from his hands. What was that? Gwen asked, looking at them with a raised brow. Remember when Felicia said she felt bad for Lizzie since Harry was going to destroy her when they did it? She and I secretly made a bet. She said it would be obvious when they did it, and I said Harry would have more self-control and be gentle. We both bet $20 on it. And from the looks of it, I lost, Peter whispered in amusement. MJ covered her eyes and pretended she didn't even know them. When Harry and Lizzie appeared, they just walked past them as Lizzie gritted her teeth and said, not a word. I got this from training, got it. Felicia and Peter just began laughing at them, secretly high-fiving each other. Chapter 158, Third Person's POV, Friday night. Gwen entered her room with wet blonde hair and a towel over her head, drying it as she went. Suddenly, a knock on the window caught her attention. Turning toward it, she saw Peter outside, dressed in civilian clothes, awkwardly waving at her with a sheepish smile. Raising an eyebrow in confusion, Gwen walked over and opened the window. What is it? More bad news you want to share? She asked, her tone teasing but with a hint of curiosity. Peter winced slightly. Okay, I deserve that. But no, this time it's different. I haven't exactly been the best boyfriend lately, and no matter how much I apologize, it won't be enough. Intrigued, Gwen crossed her arms, waiting to hear what he would say next. Still clinging to the window frame with one hand, Peter reached into his back pocket with the other. So, to make it up to you, I made some calls here and there. You know how the amusement parks are opening up now that the weather's warmer, right? Well, I got us some tickets. He held up 2 tickets, offering her a hopeful smile. A grin spread across Gwen's face. Are you asking me out on a date, Mr. Parker? That I am, Miss Stacy, Peter replied, matching her playful tone. Just the 2 of us. You and me, no one else. I know we haven't been on many dates lately because of, well, everything. I want to make up for that. I'm pretty sure the last time we went on a date was a few months ago when we, went to another universe. So, what do you say? Gwen smiled and leaned forward to kiss Peter, snatching one of the tickets from his hand. I would be more than happy to go on a date with you, Parker. As she held the tickets, her smile faltered slightly. But wait, what about our duties? Tomorrow's the weekend when all 5 of us handle the 5 boroughs. Peter grinned, already prepared for her concern. Didn't I say I made a few calls? Some of those calls were to Harry and the others. They all agreed to cover for us while we enjoy ourselves. Gwen raised an eyebrow, impressed. You really planned this all out, didn't you? Of course, Peter said with a proud smile. I would do anything for my Gwendolyn. Except keep your lips to yourself, Gwen teased, poking him lightly. Peter clutched his chest in mock pain. Ouch, right in the gut. Gwen chuckled, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead before kissing it gently. I'm just messing with you. It's a date. But now look what you've done, I have to stay up all night picking an outfit to wear. Whatever you wear, I know you're going to look absolutely stunning, Peter said earnestly. Hey, you cornball. Now shoo, I have outfits to pick out. I don't want you seeing them yet. Peter nodded, stepping back from the window. I'll come to pick you up in the morning, he promised, forming a small heart with sparks of electricity at the tips of his fingers before leaping down and heading home. Gwen shook her head with a smile, closing the window. She lay on her bed, holding the tickets close to her chest, a content expression on her face. That clueless idiot. Doesn't he realize I've already forgiven him, she thought to herself. He's so considerate, one of the things I love about him. But it also worries me. Every time he makes a mistake, he beats himself up so harshly for it. Gwen sighed and shook her head before reaching for her phone. She quickly typed out a message, "You up?" and sent it to MJ. MJ replied almost instantly, "Yeah. What's the matter?" Without hesitation, Gwen initiated a FaceTime call. As soon as MJ's face appeared on the screen, Gwen said, "I'm going to need help picking an outfit." MJ grinned knowingly. "Hey, then sister, you've come to the right person. I'm guessing Peter already asked you out on a date." Gwen smiled and nodded, "Yup." The next day, Peter stood in front of the mirror, carefully styling his hair and freshening up. He was dressed in a dark wool sweater, blue jeans, and matching blue sneakers. A golden chain peeked out from beneath the sweater. Satisfied with his appearance, Peter gave himself a confident smile. He licked his pinkies and ran them over his eyebrows. "Looking slick, Mr. Parker." "Too handsome for this world," he muttered to his reflection with a smirk. After one last glance in the mirror, Peter grabbed his keys from the nightstand using his webs and headed out of his room. As he made his way to the door, he called out, "Bye, Aunt May. I'll see you later." "Wait a minute, young man." Aunt May's voice stopped him in his tracks. Peter turned around, confused, as Aunt May approached him. She examined him closely, then pinched his cheek. "Look at my young man, looking so cute." "Sorry, I just wanted to see how you look for your date." Peter blushed slightly, feeling a mix of embarrassment and affection. Uncle Ben, who was sitting on the couch, leaned back to get a better look at Peter. "Need any money for your date?" he asked with a teasing grin. There was a brief pause before they both burst into laughter. "Enjoy yourselves, kiddo," Uncle Ben said warmly. With that, Peter left the house and made his way to Gwen's place. Gwen, inside her house, received a text from Peter letting her know he was outside. She took a deep breath, said goodbye to her dad, and stepped out. Outside, she found Peter leaning casually against a blue motorcycle, holding a matching helmet in one hand and a light blue one resting by the handle. When Peter caught sight of her, he let out a low whistle. Gwen was dressed in blue jean shorts paired with black stockings, a white and black shirt that showed a hint of her midriff, and a peach cardigan draped casually over her shoulders. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail, with two curly strands hanging loosely by her sides. Peter couldn't help but stare, admiring her look. As she walked closer, Peter put his helmet on his seat as he shot out a web, playfully pulling her into a spin right into his arms. "Damn, Ma. Who you lookin' so beautiful for?" he asked, his voice full of admiration. Gwen laughed softly, giving him a light tap on his chest. "For you, you dork," she replied with a smile, "and careful on using your powers in the open," Gwen said in lower tone. "Relax, Ma, I already made sure no one was looking." Peter then gave her a kiss which she replicated. "Why are we riding on the motorcycle? Can we even do that?" Gwen asked. Peter grinned and reached into his pocket, pulling out his driver's license with a proud smirk. "One of the many calls I made to prepare for our date. When you're rich and have connections, things come easily. I just had to make a few more calls, and I was able to get my driver's license a little earlier than usual. Of course, Harry did the same. We took our tests at the same time, aced them. And here we are." Gwen raised an eyebrow. "And you didn't tell me because I wanted it to be a surprise, you know, for our date. Now we don't have to be sneaky when we want to drive somewhere," Peter explained with a mischievous smirk. Gwen stood on her tiptoes and kissed him once more. "I would have liked to know if we were going on a motorcycle, I would have styled my hair differently," she sighed, slightly frustrated. "Right. I forgot about that." "Sorry," Peter replied, a bit apologetically. Gwen just shook her head. "Don't worry about it. I'll just fix it when we arrive." She let her ponytail loose and slipped the hair tie onto her wrist. Peter smiled and gently placed the light blue helmet on her head, making sure it was secure. He then put on his own helmet and got on the motorcycle, motioning for Gwen to hop on behind him. She adjusted her helmet and climbed on, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Hold on," Peter said as he started the bike, feeling Gwen tighten her grip around him. With that, they sped off, weaving through traffic with ease. As they rode, Gwen's hand began to wander, feeling Peter's abs through his sweater as she rested her head against his broad back. Peter chuckled, patting her hand gently. When they finally arrived at the amusement park, Peter parked the motorcycle in the lot. They both took off their helmets, laying them by the handles. Gwen started tying her hair back, holding the hair tie in her mouth as she gathered her hair. "Are you sure nothing's going to get stolen?" Gwen asked, a bit concerned. Peter smiled reassuringly as he took the hair tie from her mouth and began tying her hair for her. "Yeah, don't worry. You think I didn't already fix that problem?" Gwen smiled as he finished tying her hair and adjusted the two curly strands that framed her face. "Thank you," she said softly. "No problem," he replied nonchalantly, then kissed her forehead. With Peter's arm over her shoulder and Gwen leaning her head against him, the two made their way inside the amusement park, ready to enjoy their day together. Chapter 159, Third Person's POV. As they walked through the crowded amusement park, Gwen held Peter's hand, which was casually draped over her shoulder. She looked around at the various rides and attractions, excitement bubbling up inside her. "So, what are we going to ride first?" she asked, her eyes scanning the vibrant scene. Peter hummed thoughtfully, glancing around. There are so many options. Let's start easy and try the roller coaster." Gwen raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk tugging at her lips. "Would we even have fun? I mean, considering, you know." She trailed off, hinting at their enhanced abilities that could make even the wildest rides seem tame. Peter grinned at her. "I'm going to hit you with one of my awesome life tips. You ready?" Gwen scoffed in amusement. "All right, Mr. Philosopher, hit me with one of your tips right now." Peter pretended to clear his throat, adopting an exaggeratedly serious tone. "Ahem, you perceive things how you want to perceive them. If you think something is boring, of course, you're going to find it boring. It's all about perspective, and since we're on a date, I'm going to have an absolute blast." Gwen laughed, shaking her head in disbelief. "You never fail with these, do you? How do you even come up with them?" she teased as they joined the line for the roller coaster. "What can I say? I am one with my emotions. I just speak my mind, which just so happens to be the truth most of the time," Peter said dramatically, causing Gwen to playfully roll her eyes and pat his chest. They continued chatting as the line moved, the anticipation building until they were finally seated on the roller coaster, strapped in and ready to go. As the ride began to pick up speed, Gwen turned to Peter with a mischievous smile. "A matter of perspective, was it?" "Absolutely, my lady." "Here, look," Peter said, reaching out for her hand as the ride began to climb. Though their enhanced senses made the ride feel more like a gentle breeze, Peter was determined to make the most of it. Gwen hesitated for a moment before giving him her hand. Peter raised their hands together, and as the coaster raced down the track, the people behind them screamed in terror. But Peter. He shouted in a high-pitched tone, his enthusiasm so over the top that Gwen burst into laughter at his childishness. "Come on, join me," Peter encouraged as they neared the highest peak. Gwen giggled, her laughter bubbling up uncontrollably. He, all right, I'll join you," she said between laughs. As they reached the top and the coaster plummeted down, they both threw their hands up and shouted together, "Wee!" But Gwen couldn't hold it in, she ended up laughing halfway through, the ridiculousness of the moment too much to handle. When the ride ended and they got off, Gwen was still giggling, her hand covering her mouth slightly as she shook her head in disbelief. Peter wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "See? We can have fun, but only if we let ourselves have fun. You are something else, Parker," Gwen smiled, shaking her head at him. "What can I say? I aim to please. So, what do you want to try out next?" Peter asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Gwen pondered, her eyes scanning the various attractions. I'm trying to pick something that will be hard for you to make fun of, she said with a challenging smirk. Oh. Is that a challenge then? Babe, you underestimate me. I can make any situation fun, Peter replied confidently. Oh really? Then how about that carousel? How would you make that fun? Gwen asked, raising an eyebrow as she pointed to the whimsical, slow-moving ride. Peter grinned. Baby, do you even know me? Just watch. They joined the line, and after a bit of waiting, they both climbed onto the brightly painted horses. As the carousel began its gentle, circular journey, Gwen leaned on her horse, giving Peter a look that clearly said, well. Peter just scoffed playfully. He grabbed the pole of the horse with both hands and gave Gwen a sultry look, complete with exaggerated duck lips. Gwen's eyes widened in shock as she watched him, knowing exactly what he was about to do. Don't even think about doing what you were about to do, she exclaimed, her cheeks flushing a rosy pink as the carousel music played cheerfully in the background. Oh, come on, babes, I was about to put on the greatest show of my life just for you. Peter teased, still holding the pole with a mischievous glint in his eye. Are you crazy? Gwen asked, her blush deepening. You would have been throwing me ones, and you know it. You know what I can bring to the table, Peter said, struggling to keep a straight face as he smirked. Gwen couldn't help but cover her face in embarrassment, peeking through her fingers at Peter until the ride came to an end. As they walked away, she shook her head, still trying to process what just happened. I have forgotten how shameless you can be. Oh, please, shame is for the weak and the unattractive, Peter quipped playfully. Gwen looked at him, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. Wow, I honestly can't believe you just said that. Peter let out a half scoff, half laugh. Honestly, I've said worse. You've heard most of them too. Yeah, when it was just the two of us alone, not in a public setting, Gwen said, rolling her eyes but smiling despite herself. Let's try to make our next spot something less sexual, you deviant, Gwen said, earning her odd looks from people walking past them. Gwen turned bright pink at the stairs, while Peter leaned towards her for support, laughing so hard he had to hold his stomach. I hate you so much, Gwen mumbled, clearly embarrassed. Peter, still chuckling, went over and hugged her, planting a kiss on her cheek. I love you too. Gwen shook her head, trying to rid herself of the embarrassment. All right, for real this time, something where you don't do what you just did. All right, but you pick. Peter said with a shrug. Okay, how about that haunted house? Gwen suggested, pointing to the spooky attraction nearby. Bet, Peter agreed, taking her hand and confidently interlocking their fingers as they headed toward the line. They waited until it was their turn, and once they entered, they were enveloped in darkness. Smoke swirled around their feet like fog, and eerie decorations hung ominously around them. As they slowly walked through the dimly lit maze, Peter nudged Gwen's side and gave her a wink. Just as they were about to turn a corner, Peter suddenly raised his hands and shouted, "Boo!" The worker who was supposed to scare them ended up being the one scared, jumping back in surprise and holding his chest. Ah! Jesus Christ, kid! Gwen chuckled, seeing the worker trying to catch his breath after being jump-scared. They continued through the haunted house, laughing as they encountered various attempts to frighten them. When they finally exited, they were leaning on each other for support, still laughing. Ha ha! I can't believe that last guy almost instinctively punched you, Gwen said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. The look on his face was hilarious, Peter agreed as they continued walking hand in hand. What's next? Peter asked. I don't know, but I'm feeling a bit thirsty, Gwen said thoughtfully. Craving anything specific? Peter inquired, curious. Gwen put a finger on her chin as she pondered. Would they even have what I want? I mean, I can see a snack bar from here, they should have practically anything, Peter shrugged. You think they have milkshakes? Gwen asked, her eyes lighting up hopefully. I don't know, but I can check. What flavor do you want if they do? Peter offered. Vanilla, Gwen said with a smile. If they don't have milkshakes, see if they have lemonade. Vanilla. Peter repeated, looking at her with mock disbelief. What's wrong with vanilla? It's such a basic flavor. Chocolate is so much better, he teased. That's because you're such a child. There's nothing wrong with good old classic vanilla, Gwen scoffed. Peter held up his hands in mock defense. Liking chocolate has nothing to do with being a child. I can't believe you went there. Stay here, I'll go get it for us, he said, walking off. Vanilla is still better. Gwen called after him, cupping her hands around her mouth. Basic. Peter retorted, shouting back as he made his way to the snack bar, where he eventually found they sold milkshakes near the ice cream section. When he returned, 2 cups in hand, he found Gwen surrounded by 2 boys no older than 17. So, what are you doing by yourself? One of them asked. Are you perhaps waiting for a friend? The other added. Gwen gave them an awkward smile and pointed behind them. I'm here with my boyfriend. They turned around to see Peter standing there, sipping his milkshake nonchalantly while holding the other one in his free hand. The boys quickly raised their hands in surrender. Sorry, we didn't mean anything by it. No offense, dude, one of them said before they both walked away. Peter pressed Gwen's milkshake against her forehead. Why is it that whenever I look away, you're always getting hit on? Heck, you even get hit on when I'm around. Gwen put a hand on her hip and flipped her ponytail back dramatically. Have you taken a good look at me? I don't blame them. Peter scoffed and rolled his eyes as he handed her the milkshake. Gwen giggled at his reaction, taking the drink. As she started to sip it, she paused and sniffed in Peter's direction. Wait, is that cookies and cream? Peter rolled his eyes, swapped their drinks, and started sipping hers, handing his over to her without a word. Ah, wait, you didn't have to do that. You don't even like vanilla, Gwen said, a bit taken aback. Peter just shrugged. It's all right, I never said I don't like it. I just said it's a basic white girl flavor, he replied, smirking as he gave her a playful once-over. Did you really just call me a basic white girl to my face? Gwen asked, raising an eyebrow in challenge. If that's how you interpret it, Peter teased, taking another sip of his drink and casually walking away. The nerve of him, Gwen scoffed, but she couldn't help the loving smile that spread across her face. She sipped her milkshake, feeling content and satisfied, before jogging to catch up with him. Chapter 160, Third Person's POV. Peter and Gwen were at the game section of the amusement park, where Peter casually dribbled a basketball, drawing the attention of a crowd. He stood at the far end of the court, the hoop barely visible from where he was. Kobe! Peter shouted as he launched the ball into the air. The crowd followed its trajectory, holding their breath. The ball sailed gracefully and swished through the net. Nothing but net. Peter declared triumphantly as the crowd erupted in cheers. It was his 100th consecutive shot without a single miss. Gwen, buried under a mountain of plush toys, watched Peter with an amused smile, shaking her head at his antics. Whoop whoop. Peter celebrated, waving his arms in the air as he sauntered over to Gwen, a smug grin plastered on his face. So, what do you think? Is your boyfriend awesome or what? Gwen laughed, her eyes sparkling with amusement. Peter, what the hell are we going to do with all these plushies? Isn't it obvious? We give them all away to the little kids. Want to help me? Peter asked, his excitement contagious. Hee hee, sure, that sounds like fun, Gwen agreed, her smile widening. Peter turned to the crowd and raised his fist in the air. Free plushies for everyone. Come and get them, he shouted, and kids quickly gathered around, their faces lighting up with joy as they received their new toys. As the parents came to collect their children, each holding a plushie with a large grin, they thanked Peter and Gwen with warm smiles. Think nothing of it, Peter replied with a friendly shake of his head. Gwen noticed a little blonde girl, no older than 4, shyly hiding behind her mother's leg, too timid to pick up a plushie. Gwen followed the girl's gaze and spotted the plushie she had her eye on. Gwen crouched down, meeting the girl at eye level, and handed it to her with a soft smile. Here you go, just for you. The mother gently patted the back of her daughter's head. What do you say, sweetie? The little girl looked up at Gwen with big, innocent eyes and blurted out, I love you. The mother chuckled, trying to hold back her laughter. No, sweetheart, when someone gives you something, you're supposed to say thank you. But she gave me a teddy bear, so I love her, the girl insisted, clutching the plushie tightly. Gwen placed a hand over her heart, touched by the girl's words. So precious, she whispered, smiling warmly. Meanwhile, Peter held a plushie and pointed at a little boy. Go long, kid, he shouted. The boy's face lit up with excitement as he held out his hands. Peter threw the plushie in a perfect arc, and it landed squarely in the boy's grasp. The boy beamed with pride, holding the plushie high. Did you see that, Dad? I caught it. Haha, good work, Miles, the dad cheered, ruffling his son's hair. Both Peter and Gwen froze, their eyes widening as they looked at each other. Do you think? Gwen mouthed. Peter shrugged. How am I supposed to know? The boy, Miles, walked up to Peter, who gave him a high five. Nice catch, my man. Hee hee, thank you, Miles replied, grinning ear to ear. The dad approached Peter and Gwen, nodding with appreciation. What you two are doing is very commendable, he said, extending his hand. Peter shook it, studying the man's face. We're all just having fun here, Peter replied with a smile. It wasn't long before they had given away all the plushies, and Peter and Gwen were walking away, his arm draped over her shoulders. Do you think it could be, you know? Gwen asked, still mildly surprised. The possibility is there, but let's not forget the name is pretty common. I'm sorry, but the curiosity is killing me, Peter admitted, pulling out his phone. Gwen chuckled. I get what you mean. I'm also dying to know, she said, peeking over Peter's shoulder as he discreetly hacked into police files and searched for the name. Their eyes widened when they saw the man's picture on the screen. It was the same man from earlier, and the name read, Jefferson Morales. Ha ha ha. Whoa, what a small world we live in, Peter exclaimed with a large smile. Do you think he'll be like us, in this universe as well? Gwen whispered, still processing the discovery. The possibility is there, it could happen. Who knows? The universe works in mysterious ways, Peter replied, shutting off his phone as they continued on their date. You want to get something to eat? Peter asked with a grin. Being so awesome earlier really drained my energy. Gwen scoffed but smiled, nodding in agreement. Sure, food sounds heavenly right about now. They retraced their steps to the snack bar. This time, I'll go and order what you want, Gwen offered. All right then, waitress, here's my order, ouch. Peter winced as Gwen pinched him, glaring playfully. Sorry. Peter quickly apologized. After he told her what he wanted, Gwen nodded and went to place their orders. As she waited, she glanced back toward Peter and noticed a group of girls gathered around him, laughing and chatting. Peter, meanwhile, was just sitting there with a relaxed smile. When Gwen approached with their food, Peter turned to the girls and said, Sorry, girls, but my future wife is here. Ah, one of the girls said, a bit disappointed, causing Gwen's eyes to twitch. She shot them a look, and the girls quickly became nervous and dispersed. Gwen overheard one of them mutter, Why are the cute ones always taken? Peter had a big smile on his face as he looked at Gwen's indifferent expression. Did you hear how I called you my future wife? Gwen rolled her eyes. I'm not jealous if that's what you're wondering. I never said you were, Peter teased as they began to eat. Sigh, being so handsome has its downsides. Gwen scoffed, rolling her eyes again. You're so lucky I'm having a good time. When do you not have a good time when you're with me? If you know what I mean, Peter said, raising his eyebrows suggestively. Gwen smiled slightly, choosing not to respond as she continued eating her fries. By the way, future wife. Really? She asked, amused. Peter winked. When I think about the future, you're always there by my side. What can I say? He replied flirtatiously. Gwen snorted. You lovable dork. After finishing their meal, they decided to go on all the rides again until the sky grew dark and the sun began to set. How can we call this a successful date if we don't finish it with the Ferris wheel? Peter suggested, swinging their joined hands playfully as they walked. I guess that means we'll have to finish this one on a high note, Gwen agreed, and they headed toward the Ferris wheel. As they boarded the Ferris wheel, it began to spin, and Gwen looked out the window with a soft smile. When they reached the top, the wheel suddenly stopped, and an announcement came on, stating that the Ferris wheel was experiencing technical difficulties and would take a few minutes to fix. Damn, really? Gwen sighed. Nope, Peter said with a smirk. I paid the guy down there like $100 to make it seem that way so we could enjoy the view here. Really? Gwen asked in amusement. Yup, Peter replied smugly, pulling her into his lap. We're not having sex in a Ferris wheel, Gwen stated, raising an eyebrow. That wasn't what I was going for, Peter chuckled, giving her a funny look. I just wanted us to have a moment to ourselves, that's all. Oh. Gwen said, her expression softening as she reached up to caress his cheek. She then shifted on his lap to face him. So you really didn't do this just to have sex up here where no one would see us? Although the idea is very hot and enticing, no, Peter admitted with a grin. We're both too greedy, it would leave us wanting more. Gwen chuckled, leaning in to kiss him. I suppose you're right. Someone never wants to stop once they start. I hope that someone you're referring to is yourself, Peter teased. I remember a certain someone being really clingy and not wanting to let go. Gwen scoffed, then leaned her head on his shoulder, burying her face in his neck as they hugged, both enjoying the warmth and comforting silence between them. The world outside the Ferris wheel faded away, leaving just the two of them in their little bubble, content in each other's arms. The comforting silence was then broken by Gwen, who asked softly, Say, when you mentioned picturing the future, what did you have in mind? Peter smiled, his eyes drifting into a daydream as he answered, I imagined us living in a large house, with lots of children running around, chasing each other, some even running upside down on the ceiling. We'd be reprimanding them, calling them our little spider monkeys. The whole place would be filled with laughter and joy. Ah, our little spider monkeys, Gwen repeated, her voice filled with warmth as she leaned in and kissed Peter's cheek. That's so adorable. Gwen wrapped her arms around Peter's neck, her smile soft and loving. That future sounds absolutely beautiful. Peter kissed her forehead gently, then leaned his head against hers. Don't worry, he murmured, his voice full of quiet determination. That is a future I will make a reality. They stayed there, wrapped up in each other, as the Ferris wheel slowly began to move again, the city lights twinkling beneath them. The world felt perfect at that moment, and they both knew they were building something special together, a future filled with love, laughter, and their little spider monkeys. Fin of their date and of the chapter. Chapter 161, Third Person's POV. Peter and Gwen walked out of the amusement park, both chuckling as the day faded into night. You're going to let me drive, right? Gwen asked mischievously. Peter tossed her the keys with a grin. I never imagined my girlfriend would be a biker girl. Gwen scoffed playfully. You just want to see my ass arched up on the seat, don't you? You're goddamn right I do. Peter responded with enthusiasm, giving her a thumbs up. Gwen chuckled in amusement as they reached the parking lot. Peter let out a low whistle as he watched Gwen throw a leg over the bike. She loosened her ponytail, letting her hair fall around her shoulders, and leaned forward on the bike, puckering her lips toward Peter and ruffling her hair a bit as she arched on the seat. Zoinks! Peter exclaimed, whipping out his phone to take pictures. Gwen couldn't help but laugh, hearing his exaggerated reaction. She struck a few poses for the photos before grabbing her helmet and tossing Peter's to him. Let's get going, you dork. Yes, Mommy. Peter said shamelessly as he hopped on the bike and wrapped his arms around her bare waist. Gwen blushed slightly, leaning back toward Peter. I don't know why, but hearing you call me that felt weirdly nice. Peter just laughed, knocking her helmet gently with his. Maybe because someone's a kinky little lady. Perhaps, she teased, making a kissing noise as she nudged his helmet with hers before leaning forward and starting the bike. Oh Lord, have mercy, Peter muttered as he watched Gwen lean forward, his hands tightening around her toned waist. Hold on, Gwen said with a grin as she revved the engine. Vroom, with pleasure, Peter replied, and with that, they took off. Gwen and Peter weaved through traffic, the cold wind rushing past them as they sped along, always staying within the speed limit like the upstanding citizens they were. As they came to a red light, both of their visors flashed as a HUD appeared, momentarily catching Gwen off guard. What is it, Arya? Peter asked, noticing the alert. Sorry to interrupt your date, but I have some important news, Arya replied. No problem, we were done with our date. I'm just glad nothing ruined it. So, what's wrong? Peter asked. It's the Tinkerer. Ah. What about him? Shouldn't he be in jail? Gwen asked, joining the conversation as the light turned green and they continued driving. He is, but that's the problem. While in prison, he's met someone who will be known as the Shocker. They're becoming fast friends, and they've started stealing from their recreational activities while acting on good behavior. I see. So, it's likely the Tinkerer is planning to build the Shockers, well, Shockers. Why are you telling me this instead of reporting it to the warden? Peter asked curiously. You mentioned before that some villains are fated to be born, and no matter what we do, we can't stop it. I was just wondering if this is the same case. Should I intervene or leave it up to fate? Although I said most of them, not all need to be born or will be born. We should prevent the ones we can. Report what you found to the warden and make sure they're punished accordingly, while ensuring they can't attempt this again, Peter instructed. All right, sorry for interrupting, Arya said before disconnecting. What did she mean by saying that some villains are fated to be born? Gwen asked curiously. I don't really know how to explain it so it makes sense. Okay, do you remember how in Miles' universe, there were a lot of Peter Parkers who became Spider-Man? Well, that's fate. It shows that in almost every universe, Peter Parker is destined to be Spider-Man. And wherever there's a Spider-Man, there's a villain to put him to the test, to push him past his limits over and over again. It's like a law of the universe, Peter explained. How the hell did you come up with that theory? Gwen asked, glancing back at Peter in surprise. Think about our universe as a comic book. It would get boring if all we fought were everyday thugs, Peter replied. Wait, is that how you see our lives? As a comic book? Gwen asked, shocked. Yes and no. I mean, come on, we're superheroes fighting supervillains. You were the one who named me Spider-Man. Don't you find it weird that even though you came up with the name, there's another Spider-Man across the multiverse? That just sent a shiver down my spine. You're about to give me an existential crisis, Gwen said jokingly, though there was a certain edge to her tone. And didn't you notice how they all had almost the same origin story? They were bitten by a radioactive spider, and because of their careless mistakes, their caretaker paid the price, giving them the push to become a hero in their last dying breath, Peter continued. Peter, please shut up. You're honestly scaring me. Right, sorry, my bad. Anyway, as I was saying before I got sidetracked, there will be villains born to test us, test our resolve, our limits. Take Doc Ock, for example. He bested me using his cunning. He forced me to choose between capturing him and saving people in need. And he and I both knew which one I would choose. Elsewhere. A long, tentacled arm moved rapidly across a whiteboard, holding a marker as it scribbled down complex scientific formulas. Otto stood before the board, muttering to himself. Do I even need to steal someone else's body? I could just use my own DNA to create the most perfect clone of myself. With a bit of genetic coding and editing, I could craft a marvelous new body. After all, I'm already perfect, but I can make myself even better. And as I do that, I could mix my DNA with that of a spider. His eyes gleamed with ambition. But it can't be just any spider. It needs to be an enhanced spider. I'll need to run tests and secure funding for this, but I must avoid drawing Spider-Man's attention, Otto muttered, venom dripping from his tone. Although this feels like a disgrace to my intellect, I have no other choice. I'm desperate, I don't have the luxury of being selective about how I acquire my funds, Otto grumbled in frustration. He moved away from the whiteboard to his work desk, where he began assembling a small device with the limited resources available to him. It didn't take long before he finished. He grabbed his long green coat and fedora, then picked up a specialized belt designed to avoid surveillance detection. Stepping outside, he noticed it was nighttime and nodded in approval. Perfect, he muttered as he exited his building. After walking around the neighborhood for a while, Otto found what he was looking for, a black van parked a few buildings away. He skillfully lockpicked the van and slipped inside. Once in, he hotwired it and began driving off, making a few stops along the way. Eventually, he spotted what he needed, a solitary ATM. Grabbing one of the large bags he had brought, Otto got out of the van and approached the machine. He quickly connected the device he had built, pressing a few buttons. The ATM began spitting out money, and Otto smirked as he held the bag out to catch the bills. Once it finished, he disconnected the device and returned to the van, driving away. He soon arrived at another ATM but noticed people nearby. He decided to wait, counting the money he had already collected. $36,000. It's not a lot, but these machines usually hold around $100,000. I'd need to spend the entire night going around the city, and the neighboring one, if I want to gather over $1 million. His eyes narrowed in thought. Wait. Spider-Man mostly operates in New York. If I leave the city, I should be much safer. A new plan began to form in his mind. I'll gather as much money as possible and then leave the city for a while. Once I'm out, I can start recruiting men and hire a crew of henchmen to do my bidding. That way, I can acquire even more money quickly. While they collect, I can dedicate my time to starting my experiments. Otto's face twisted into a sly grin. I'll need to remain anonymous, so if they get caught, it won't trace back to me. Yes, this is perfect. Otto grinned as he continued to strategize, the gleam of his plans reflected in his cold, calculating eyes. He knew that the path he was embarking on was risky, but the potential rewards outweighed the dangers. After all, he had always been a man who prided himself on his intellect and ability to outthink any opponent, including Spider-Man. Driving out of New York seemed like the wisest move. It would allow him to operate in the shadows, away from the prying eyes of the authorities and the ever-watchful Spider-Man. He would find a small, inconspicuous town where he could set up a temporary base. There, he would build his army of henchmen, people desperate enough to follow orders without question. They would be his tools, nothing more. Once he had the funds and the manpower, the real work would begin. Otto envisioned the possibilities of his genetic experiments, combining his already superior intellect with the physical abilities of an enhanced spider. He could surpass Spider-Man in every way, creating a new body that would make him invincible. The thought filled him with a twisted sense of excitement. Spider-Man won't know what hit him, Otto muttered under his breath as he drove towards the city limits. I'll build an empire, one that will bring this city to its knees, and then, I'll come for him. The fool won't stand a chance against me. With that, he pressed his foot down on the gas pedal, the van speeding into the night, leaving the city that had been both his home and his prison. Otto Octavius was no longer the man he once was. He was becoming something more, something far more dangerous. And as the city slept, unaware of the storm that was brewing, he felt a surge of triumph. Soon, the world would witness the rise of a new power, one that would bend it to his will. He had much work to do, but the pieces were falling into place. All he needed was time, and that was something he was willing to take by force if necessary. The game had only just begun, and Otto was determined to be the one to win it. Chapter 162, Third Person's POV. Both Peter and Gwen plopped into Gwen's bed, a bit sweaty and breathing heavily, not from exhaustion, but from the lingering heat between them. Gwen leaned against Peter's chest, her leg draped over his, her head resting by his heart with her hand gently placed on his chest. Peter had an arm around her shoulder, tenderly moving Gwen's hair away from her face so it wouldn't stick. A comfortable silence enveloped them as they basked in the afterglow of their intimate moment. Gwen's eyes suddenly sparkled with mischief. She looked up at Peter, moving her hand from his chest to tilt his chin toward her. With a teasing smile, she leaned in for a kiss and asked, "So, how was it?" "Phenomenal," Peter replied with a content sigh, kissing her forehead. "I wasn't talking about the sex," Gwen said with a playful scoff. "You weren't?" "So it wasn't?" Peter asked, raising an eyebrow in mock confusion. "I never said that either," Gwen retorted, bopping his nose. She then held his face and gave him another sensual kiss. "And you know it's never a dull moment with you under the sheets." "You're damn right it's not," Peter huffed with pride. "The day that stops is the day I stop being a man," he declared, raising a fist triumphantly. Gwen couldn't help but chuckle at his antics. Peter then turned to her with genuine curiosity. "Wait, so what were you referring to? Isn't it obvious? Your kiss with Felicia. Was it good? Was it bad? Did it make you wish for more? Or maybe regret that you didn't do more?" Gwen asked, batting her eyelashes at Peter. "My love, why are you doing this?" Peter asked, exasperation creeping into his voice. "I haven't the faintest idea what you mean, darling," Gwen replied, her smile never wavering. Peter sighed. "You know if I lie, your spidey sense will catch it. If I tell the truth, you'll get upset, and that'll ruin your mood, which would ruin the entire day for you." "Oh. So you're saying the truth will hurt me?" Gwen asked, raising an eyebrow, though the mischievous glint never left her eyes. Peter just stared at her, knowing she was enjoying this far too much. Then, out of nowhere, Peter's expression shifted. He smiled at Gwen, but it wasn't his usual charming grin, it was a closed-eye smile that spelled trouble. You know what, since you're so curious. Yes, the kiss with Felicia felt great, amazing even. If I could, I'd convince you and MJ to let her join our little harem so I could keep kissing those honey-flavored lips of hers. Gwen's mouth fell open, completely taken aback by Peter's boldness. Peter looked at Gwen with a raised brow, waiting for her reaction. Is that what you wanted to hear? Gwen blinked a few times, still processing Peter's words. I don't know what to say. Just wow, in like capital letters. Wow. Mr. Parker, you are bold. I didn't know you were willing to go that far, Gwen said, not the least bit upset since she had been the one egging him on. Peter scoffed, honey, you don't know how low I can go, and trust me, I can go even lower. Gwen immediately took that as a challenge. She sat up, covering her chest with the sheets, and looked at Peter with narrowed eyes. Now I want to see how low you're willing to go. You're doing this to get me mad on purpose for asking you that. So do it, show me your lowest, Gwen challenged, glaring at him. Peter met her glare head-on as he sat up to face her. Without breaking eye contact, he shot a web to the side, pulling his backpack toward him, and took out his phone from his back pocket. With a few quick presses, Peter showed Gwen his phone screen, calling Felicia Catface, maintaining eye contact. Peter put the call on speaker as it rang. Gwen narrowed her eyes, unsure of what he was planning. Yo. What's Felicia's voice started before Peter interrupted her. Felicia, I love the sweet taste of your lips. They were soft and delicate, and I hope I can taste your soft lips on mine once more, Peter said, his gaze never leaving Gwen's. Wah, beat. Peter hung up and tossed his phone to the side. Woman, do not test my level of pettiness. I have no limits when it comes to being petty. Meanwhile, Felicia was in her bed, beet red, rolling around in anguish as she clutched her pillow and let out a muffled scream into it. What the hell is his problem? Who says such a thing? Was he dared to or something? Felicia yelled into her pillow. She then held her heated face, continuing to blush, and stared off into the distance. Did he really like it that much? She muttered, slowly drawing her hand to her lips. Felicia went back to rolling on the bed and beating up her pillow. She then laid on her and lifted the pillow in the air before pressing it down on her face once more. God, do I hate how much I love it. She mumbled in an angry tone of voice. Back in Gwen's room, Gwen looked at Peter with a straight face before she began to slow clap. You know what, you win. I shouldn't have asked you that. And honestly, I respect you for not backing down. You truly have guts, Parker. And you don't, since I just finished destroying them. Peter quipped, flicking his fingers with a snap. Gwen couldn't help but laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. PHTTTT, you're such an idiot, and you love me for it, Peter replied, pulling her back into his arms with a grin. Yeah, I do, Gwen admitted with a smile, leaning in for another kiss. So if her lips taste like honey, what do mine taste like? Gwen asked mischievously, her eyes gleaming with challenge. I don't know. I'll have to taste them some more to find out, Peter replied with mock arrogance. Ooh, that was good. Gwen said, holding his face as she got on top of him, pulling him into another passionate kiss that quickly turned into a full-blown make-out session. After a moment, she pulled back slightly, catching her breath. Then how about now? Can you tell now? She asked between kisses. Definitely ice cream, Peter said with a serious expression, which made Gwen giggle. Gwen let out a contented sigh as she laid her head on Peter's chest, snuggling up to him. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of their embrace. So, if you were really to make a harem, would Felicia be a part of it? Gwen asked suddenly, looking up at Peter with curiosity. Peter stared down at her, his brow furrowing slightly. Why do you love trouble? It's a serious question. I want an answer, Gwen insisted. Peter sighed, a smirk playing on his lips. I have a question of my own, do you like NTR or something? NTR? Gwen asked, tilting her head, unfamiliar with the term. Netto rare, Peter clarified. Gwen processed the word, recognizing it as Japanese and translating it in her mind. Cuckold. Ooh, and no, you cheating on me doesn't turn me on or sexually excite me, she said with a straight face. Well, You could have fooled me with all those questions, Peter scoffed, earning a playful slap on the chest from Gwen, who pouted in response. Even if you were into that, I'm not shaming you. I don't kink shame. Whatever excites you, except if what excites you is little kids. Then we might have a problem, and you'd need to go to jail. You're disgusting for even mentioning that, Gwen said, grimacing. I was being serious, Peter replied with a sigh. All right, I'm sorry for asking you all those questions. It's just something you said earlier that got me thinking, and I can't stop thinking about it no matter how hard I try. Peter looked at her curiously, wondering what she was referring to. You mentioned that you wanted a large family, with lots of kids running around, chasing each other, a house full of laughter and joy. And honestly, as I picture that, I fell in love with that image. I can't stop thinking about it, Gwen said with a faraway look in her eyes. Peter raised an eyebrow, curious about where this was going. As you know, before I met you, it was just me and my dad. I know that my dad did everything in his power to make me feel loved and not alone, and I can't love him enough for it. But I still felt a bit lonely, you know. Peter nodded, listening intently. Then I met you, and then Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Ever since I've met you, not once have I felt lonely. Your aunt and uncle soon became mine as well, they saw me as one of their own. Just like that, you three became a part of my family too. And it felt amazing. Peter blushed slightly at her words but let her continue. Then I met MJ, who quickly became my best friend and like a sister to me. Although I never planned to share my boyfriend with her, it just kind of happened. And honestly, I feel like that just made us closer. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked, Gwen said, shaking her head. I love the idea of us having a large family. I can't help but think about how if I did accept this harem idea of yours, that would mean our family would grow. I'm also beginning to think about the future, like how even though our kids would have different mothers, they'd all still be brothers and sisters with a strong sense of unity, a unity like no other. Our own little spider family apart from our hero group. Peter opened his mouth to say something, but Gwen put a finger over his lips. Like I said, it's just a thought. Don't think I'm in support of a harem. Well, just don't get your hopes up. Peter practically imagined a chibi Spider-Man devil on one shoulder and another chibi angel Spider-Man on the other. They both had an arm over the other as they kicked their feet, chanting, harem. 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 He shook his head to flick the image away and looked back at Gwen, who was turning red from embarrassment at even mentioning it. Shall I change the subject of our pillow talk? Peter offered, knowing that showing too much excitement might give Gwen the wrong idea and make her uncomfortable. Gwen rapidly nodded her head. Yes, please, she muttered. All right, so I was thinking about making a Spider-Man app, Peter said, revealing one of his future plans. What? Gwen asked, looking at Peter in surprise. Yeah, we can't always be out there looking for trouble, it's inefficient. So with the app, people could request our help. The app would tell us their location, and we'd go there immediately to help in any way we could. We could even set it up so people could request specific heroes. Arya could arrange it so that those in need of immediate help are prioritized. Gwen sat up, looking at Peter with wide eyes. That's an amazing idea. We could help so many more people than before. There are people who need our help but can't show it, so we really wouldn't know. But with this, it would be so much easier. Am I awesome or what? Peter said smugly. Gwen chuckled and kissed his cheek. The best. Chapter 163, Third Person's POV, the next day. In Peter's hideout, Peter and Harry stood together, overlooking the final configuration of their creation. Is everything in order? Peter asked, scrutinizing a specific section for any errors. No need to worry, Harry replied with a smug grin. I've triple-checked everything. The power source is secure, the weapon systems are fully operational, and all the thrusters are showing green across the board. We're good to go. Both Peter and Harry exchanged proud looks as they admired their completed jet, a project they had started together and finally brought to fruition. What should we name it? Harry asked, his voice touched with sentiment as he gazed at the final design. The spider jet, Peter muttered, almost absent-mindedly. Come on, dude, be more creative, Harry scoffed. All right, Mr. I have great naming sense but really I just stole someone else's name, what's your big idea? Low blow, man, Harry glared, then grinned. But get ready for this, the name I've chosen is the Weaver. Image, damn. Peter cursed, frustrated that he hadn't thought of it first. He rolled his eyes at Harry's smug expression. You see the vision, right? Harry laughed. Yeah, because it'll be weaving through the air, and we're basically a team of spiders. Peter grumbled, still annoyed that Harry had come up with the perfect name first. Just then, Lizzie appeared, jogging toward them with an excited look on her face. Hey guys, I just finished my hero training. No, you haven't, Peter teased, instantly deflating her mood. What? I know I finished a day later than Harry and the others, but I'm ready. Ask Arya. I've been working hard, Lizzie insisted, determination burning in her eyes. I didn't mean that, Peter said, smiling. Sure, you completed your training regimen, and you've been working hard, no doubt. But to truly finish, you need to fight all 5 of us. When all 5 give you the okay, then you'll have completed your training. Lizzie pouted as her hair began to rise, giving off a fiery aura thanks to her abilities. She pointed at Peter, saying, You're not fair. You're making that up. That didn't happen with the others, I know it. Peter just stuck out his tongue. Cry about it. Fine, I'll do your stupid challenge. I'll show you just how much I've learned. Peter smiled. The others aren't here, they're on patrol right now. Ugh. Lizzie groaned. Fine. In that case, I'll just think about the hero name I'll use when I debut. Oh. Do you already have something planned? Harry asked curiously, a loving smile on his face. Lizzie beamed with pride. Since you're Nightwing, I shall be Starfire. They're a couple, right? So it's perfect. Some of my microwaves come from the stars, so it's the absolute perfect name for me. Peter's face remained expressionless, while Harry's smile turned awkward. Peter tilted his head in confusion. You read the comic books? You. He repeated the you to emphasize his disbelief. What? No, I watch the cartoons while eating breakfast. They're pretty entertaining. I really like Starfire, she's awesome. I also did some research with Arya and found out that Robin is Nightwing, so of course they're a couple. So it's perfect. Lizzie declared, proud of herself. Peter facepalmed while Harry just smiled, finding her adorable. Doing Nightwing is a stretch, but it's within limits. But Starfire and Nightwing. That's pushing it. We'd definitely get sued, and we'd look like little kids playing pretend heroes, Peter sighed. Lizzie sighed too, realizing Peter had a point. She glanced at Harry, seeking his opinion, which mattered most to her. I'm sorry, babe, but I'm with Peter on this one. Nightwing and Starfire together is just too much. Surely you have another name picked out. Lizzie looked down, her face turning red with embarrassment. Both Peter and Harry exchanged confused looks at her reaction. What? You don't have a second choice? Harry asked, curious. Lizzie nodded, growing more embarrassed as she mumbled, Firestar. Peter and Harry looked at each other before shrugging. Yeah, that works, Peter nodded. Yeah, I don't see a problem with that name. It suits you, Harry agreed. Lizzie looked up in surprise. What? But all I did was switch the words around. Yeah, so. It just couldn't be Starfire, Peter shrugged. And if anyone questions it, just say you're basing your name on the sun, Harry added with a smirk. He then approached Lizzie and kissed her cheek. I mean, you're as hot as one, he teased. Lizzie blushed slightly, while Peter made a gagging noise before covering his mouth. Oh God, I think I'm gonna be sick, I threw up in my mouth a bit. Oh, stop hating. You just wish one of your girlfriends was as hot as mine, Harry scoffed, hugging Lizzie from behind. You heard that, Gwen. Peter called out with a grin. Harry's head snapped around, panic flashing across his face. When he realized no one was there, he let out a sigh of relief, only to realize he'd been tricked. He glared back at Peter, but suddenly felt a cold hand on his shoulder, causing his expression to pale. Don't worry, Pete, I heard everything, Gwen's voice whispered in his ear as her grip tightened. Oh. Harry let out a girlish scream, jumping into a fighting stance. Gwen uncloaked herself, scoffing, coward. She removed her mask and walked over to Peter, kissing him on the cheek. Meanwhile, Harry clutched his chest, feeling his heart pound rapidly. Just so we're clear, I still stand by my case. Whatever, Gwen said, rolling her eyes and brushing it off. Anyway, I see you two finished the jet, the Weaver, both Peter and Harry corrected in unison. Right, so are we going to test it? Yeah, we're just waiting for everyone. Peter said, glancing toward the door as both MJ and Felicia appeared. With the press of a button, their hero outfits retracted, leaving them in civilian clothing. Good, everyone's here. Let's get in. Peter exclaimed, prompting both him and Harry to rush inside the Weaver. Once inside, Peter took the pilot's seat while Harry settled into the co-pilot's chair. They both donned their headphones and began flicking switches. Everyone, please remain seated at all times. Seat belts are to be worn for your own safety, Peter said over the intercom. Damn, we didn't even get a chance to sit down and rest, Felicia sighed as she buckled up. As she did, she glanced in Peter's direction, her mind briefly replaying his words from the previous night, causing a faint, indiscriminate blush to color her cheeks. The others quickly took their seats as Peter began the countdown. We will now begin the countdown. Please hold on to any personal belongings. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Peter and Harry counted down together, pushing a small red button. The wall in front of the Weaver began to open, revealing a curved runway. The Weaver swiftly followed the runway, leading to the train tracks of their subway station hideout. As they charged ahead, the jet turned invisible. They burst through a fake wall, and both Harry and Peter pulled back on the steering handles, causing the jet to ascend and spiral toward the sky. Both Harry and Peter grinned excitedly as they laughed, performing tricks while soaring above skyscrapers and other buildings with impressive efficiency. Inside the cabin, the others exchanged small smiles, delighted at the thought of having their own personal jet. The girls soon began chatting casually. Where do I go to file a formal complaint about Parker? Lizzie asked. MJ chuckled, what did he do this time? I heard that. Peter called out. MJ just laughed. Good, she retorted. Well, I've already completed my training, and now he wants me to fight everyone to gain their approval so I can officially start. And I think it's unfair since neither of you had to do that. That seems fair. I don't see a problem with that. That's understandable. MJ, Gwen, and Felicia responded, each in turn. How? Lizzie asked, baffled by their reactions. Felicia answered, although we finished our official training early, the others waited for me to decide whether or not to pursue the hero life. They waited an extra week, which gave them time to refine and practice other skills. You didn't have that extra week of practice like the rest of us, so the test is mostly to see if you're truly ready. Ah, I see. You couldn't have just explained that. Lizzie asked, looking at Peter in confusion. Peter only shrugged. Where's the fun in that? Ready to try out the thrusters, he asked, his excitement evident. Hell yeah. Harry replied. They both activated the thrusters, which expanded by the wings and at the back of the jet. With the press of a button, they shot off at a terrifying speed. Ah! Lizzie cried out as they accelerated. The others merely smiled, their heightened senses making it feel more like a thrilling roller coaster ride. The invisible jet sliced through the air. How are the heat shields holding up? Peter asked. Everything's still in the green. The shields are working as intended, the jet isn't being affected by high-speed friction against the air, Harry informed him. Say, how long would it take this thing to fly around the world? Felicia asked curiously. Based on everything I'm seeing, approximately 2 hours or more, Peter replied. Oh, I thought it would have been quicker, Felicia said, sounding less than impressed. Both Harry and Peter put the plane on autopilot and slowly turned their seats to face her. Excuse me, they said in unison. What? Felicia asked, bemused. 1. You're underestimating just how large the world actually is, Peter said. Harry nodded in agreement. Not to mention, this is only our first version. We'll improve it as we go, but 2 hours is impressive as hell. All right, geez, Felicia said, raising her hands in surrender. I didn't mean to hurt your egos. They both scoffed and returned to manually flying the plane, while Felicia looked to the others, pointing her thumb toward the boys with an expression that read, "Can you believe them?" This caused the others to chuckle in amusement. Meanwhile, Harry and Peter continued to fly the jet. They arrived at what appeared to be the Grand Canyon. They flew in between the rocks while simultaneously performing tricks. As they drove, Gwen then asked, "Hey, so when are you going to complete the spider app?" The others looked curiously, wondering what she was referring to, while Peter just answered, "When we finish building the all-seeing eye, the satellite, we wouldn't want bad people using that app to trick us," Peter informed her. "Ah, I see, that makes sense," Gwen nodded. She then saw that the others had confused expressions, causing Gwen to then share what Peter had planned. Spider-Man 164, Third Person's POV. After Peter and Harry's successful test flight in the Weaver, the others took turns flying the jet, getting a feel for it before Peter brought them all back to their hideout. Once they had parked the jet in its designated spot, Peter and Harry shared a quick, satisfied fist bump, smirking at each other. Peter then headed to his personal lab and returned with a watch in hand. "Here," he said, tossing it to Lizzie. Catching it with both hands, Lizzie looked at the watch in confusion. "It's a suit Harry and I designed for you," Peter explained. "It's meant to absorb the excess radiation you emit when using your powers and convert it into an ultimate attack, a maser beam." Maser. Maser. Don't tell me, I studied for this. Microwave amplification by stimulated emission of radiation, right? Lizzie said, trying to recall. Peter nodded, impressed. Exactly. In simple terms, it's a high-powered blast that can disintegrate almost anything it hits. So, I can't stress this enough, be careful who you use it against. You might accidentally kill someone. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Lizzie's expression turned serious as she nodded. Then, with a smile full of gratitude, she looked at Peter and Harry. "Thank you, both of you." Harry blushed, rubbing the back of his head. "Don't worry about it." Peter rolled his eyes, smirking. "Thank me once I finish beating you up. Now, why don't you try on the suit?" Lizzie nodded, putting on the watch and mimicking what she had seen the others do. However, nothing happened, leaving her confused. Peter's smirk turned sinister. "It works on voice recognition, which I regret not doing for the others. It'll only activate if you say the magic words," he said, mouthing the phrase to her. Everyone looked at Peter in shock. "You're a monster," Felicia said, shaking her head. "I'm protecting my watch with my life," MJ declared, clutching her own watch. "If you even think about touching my watch, I will literally fight you," Gwen added, giving Peter a serious look. "Do I have to?" Lizzie asked, her face reddening in embarrassment. Peter just nodded proudly. "You're a bully, and after I just thanked you so graciously too," Lizzie muttered. Taking a deep breath, she thrust her arms forward, determined to get it over with. "It's morphin' time." "Music to my ears," Peter muttered, grinning. Harry, meanwhile, wore an awkward expression as Lizzie transformed. Her suit was yellow with red flame designs on the arms and legs. A shining star adorned the center of her chest, and a red flame-like mask appeared on her face, turning her blonde hair red. Surrounded by a fire-like glow, Lizzie began to levitate from the ground. "I am Firestar," she declared enthusiastically, spreading her arms wide as warm air radiated around her. "So, who am I fighting first?" Lizzie asked, clearly excited. "The order will be Harry, MJ, Felicia, Gwen, then me," Peter said. "Wait, why am I first?" Harry protested, feeling he should at least go after MJ and Felicia. "She's your girl. You're going to subconsciously go easy on her." "Let's head to the training room," Peter explained. Harry couldn't argue with that logic and followed Peter as they led the way to the training room, all adorning their hero suits. Peter and the others watched from a distance as Harry and Lizzie faced off, ready to spar. Lizzie was the first to strike, her hands glowing brightly as she flew forward, her heated fist aimed at Harry with an excited grin. Instead of dodging, Harry ducked and countered with a punch to her stomach. However, he winced as he pulled his hand back, seeing his knuckles singed even as they began to heal. Lizzie, on the other hand, had the wind knocked out of her by Harry's strength. Lizzie gasped, clutching her stomach as she stumbled back a few steps. The impact of Harry's punch was no joke, even though she was the one with superheated powers. She quickly recovered, her fiery aura flaring up as she glared playfully at Harry. All right, no holding back then, she declared, her voice determined. Harry grinned, though he shook his hand slightly to relieve the lingering sting. Wouldn't dream of it. Lizzie launched herself at Harry again, this time faster and with more precision. She spun midair, aiming a flaming kick at Harry's side. Harry sidestepped, catching her ankle with surprising speed, and with a quick twist, he tossed her to the side. Lizzie quickly regained her balance, hovering above the ground as she sent a barrage of fireballs toward him. Harry's eyes narrowed as he dodged the first few, but then decided to meet the attack head-on. He charged through the flames, letting his enhanced durability absorb the heat. As he closed the distance, he swung at Lizzie with a powerful right hook. Lizzie crossed her arms in front of her just in time to block, the force of the punch sending her crashing into the wall. The others watching the fight winced as Lizzie made impact, but she quickly pushed herself off the wall, her flames intensifying. Lizzie shot forward once again, this time feinting a punch before dropping low and sweeping Harry's legs out from under him. As he fell, she blasted him point-blank with a concentrated beam of heat, sending him sliding across the floor. Harry grunted as he collided with the ground, but he quickly flipped back onto his feet, shaking off the heat. Getting creative, I see, Harry remarked, his eyes shining with excitement. Just warming up, Lizzie shot back. Peter watched the exchange with a keen eye, analyzing Lizzie's fighting style. She was fast and agile, using her flames to enhance her attacks and keep Harry on his toes. But Harry was holding his own, his durability and strength making him a tough opponent to crack. Lizzie then decided to change tactics. She flew higher, out of Harry's immediate reach, and began to gather energy in her hands. The flames around her intensified, growing hotter and more concentrated. Harry could feel the temperature in the room rise, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. All right, Harry, let's see how you handle this. Lizzie called out, before unleashing a massive wave of fire down upon him. Harry crossed his arms in front of him, bracing himself as the fiery wave crashed into him. The heat was intense, but Harry grit his teeth, pushing through it. As the flames began to subside, he launched himself at Lizzie, jumping higher than she expected. He grabbed her by the ankle and pulled her down, slamming her into the ground. The impact caused a small crater in the training room floor, and Lizzie groaned, feeling the wind knocked out of her again. But she didn't let up. As Harry tried to pin her down, she ignited her entire body, causing Harry to let go with a hiss as his hands were burned once more. Taking advantage of the moment, Lizzie rolled out from under him and blasted him with a concentrated beam of her new mazer attack from the star on her chest. The beam struck Harry square in the chest, sending him flying backward and crashing into the wall. The others watching gasped as the sheer force of the attack left Harry momentarily stunned. Lizzie stood, breathing heavily, her flames flickering but still strong. She didn't want to hurt Harry, but she knew he could take it. She waited, watching as Harry slowly got back to his feet, a look of surprise on his face. Wow, Lizzie. That was intense, Harry admitted, shaking his head to clear the daze. He glanced down at his chest where the mazer beam had hit, noticing the singed fabric of his suit. Peter wasn't kidding when he said that attack was powerful. Lizzie smiled, though there was a hint of worry in her eyes. Sorry, I didn't mean to, Harry cut her off with a laugh. Don't apologize. That was awesome. But, I think I'm done for now. He raised a hand in surrender, still grinning. Peter stepped forward, clapping his hands together. Not bad, Lizzie. You handled yourself well. But remember, that mazer attack is a last resort. You don't want to overuse it, especially in a real fight where you might need that extra energy. Lizzie nodded, still catching her breath. While Harry continued to look down on his suit, still surprised it actually took damage. Let's take a small break, fix the training so Lizzie could gather her strength, Peter said as spider-bots appeared crawling through. After their breakup and Lizzie gathered her energy, it was MJ's turn to fight against her. She got in her Spider-Man stance and looked towards Lizzie with a smile. I'm not your boyfriend, so I won't be going easy on you. I wasn't expecting it, Lizzie said, levitating with her flame-like aura. Without wasting another moment, MJ launched herself forward with incredible speed, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to close the gap between them in an instant. She aimed a swift kick at Lizzie's midsection, but Lizzie was ready this time. She spun in midair, narrowly avoiding the strike, and countered with a fiery burst aimed directly at MJ. MJ flipped backward, dodging the flames by a hair's breadth. She landed gracefully on the balls of her feet, her eyes locked on Lizzie as she quickly assessed the situation. Not bad, but you'll have to be quicker than that. Lizzie hovered a few feet above the ground, her flames swirling around her like a protective barrier. I'm just getting started, she replied confidently. MJ darted forward again, this time zigzagging unpredictably to throw off Lizzie's aim. Lizzie tried to track her movements, firing off small bursts of flame in rapid succession, but MJ's agility was remarkable. She dodged each attack with ease, closing the distance until she was within striking range. Lizzie suddenly thrust her hands forward, unleashing a wide arc of fire in front of her, but MJ was too fast. She flipped over the flames, landing behind Lizzie and sweeping her legs out from under her. Lizzie let out a surprised gasp as she was knocked off balance, but quickly caught herself mid-fall by flaring her flames, regaining her hover. MJ wasted no time, shooting a webline to pull herself toward Lizzie, her fist aimed at Lizzie's shoulder. Lizzie barely had time to react as she crossed her arms in front of her, blocking the punch, but the force of the impact sent her skidding backward through the air. Lizzie's eyes narrowed as she nodded, realizing she needed to outmaneuver MJ. She started spinning rapidly in midair, creating a fiery vortex around herself. The flames grew hotter and more intense, forming a swirling inferno that began to expand outward. MJ's eyes widened as the vortex grew, and she quickly shot a webline to the ceiling, pulling herself up and away from the expanding flames. She watched as Lizzie created a whirlwind of fire, the heat radiating from it nearly unbearable. Impressive, MJ muttered to herself. As Lizzie continued to spin, MJ shot 2 weblines to opposite walls and pulled herself into a high-speed swing. She circled the vortex, gaining momentum, and then released the lines, launching herself straight at Lizzie's center. She angled her body, planning to slip through the flames and deliver a powerful kick. But Lizzie had anticipated this move. Just as MJ was about to reach her, Lizzie abruptly halted her spin, dissipating the vortex in an explosive burst of flames. The sudden change caught MJ off guard, and she found herself engulfed in the flames, unable to adjust her trajectory in time. MJ grit her teeth, bracing herself as the heat washed over her. The flames licked at her suit, but it held strong, designed to withstand extreme temperatures. As the explosion subsided, she landed on the ground, slightly singed but still on her feet. Lizzie floated down, her aura still blazing but showing signs of exhaustion. MJ panted slightly, a grin still on her face despite the burns on her suit. Before Lizzie could respond, MJ shot another webline, yanking herself forward and launching a rapid series of kicks at Lizzie, who barely managed to block them. Each impact sent shockwaves through Lizzie's body, but she held her ground, countering with quick bursts of flame to keep MJ at bay. The two continued their intense back and forth, with MJ using her agility to dodge Lizzie's attacks while Lizzie kept her flames burning, trying to outmaneuver MJ. The room was filled with the sounds of their clashing, each of them pushing the other to their limits. Finally, after several more exchanges, MJ saw an opening. Lizzie hesitated for just a moment, and MJ capitalized on it. She shot a webline behind Lizzie, pulling herself around her in a tight circle and then delivered a swift kick to Lizzie's back, sending her sprawling forward. Lizzie hit the ground, her flames sputtering out as she lay there, catching her breath. MJ landed softly beside her, offering a hand to help her up. "You did great, Lizzie. I had to really work for that one." Lizzie smiled tiredly, accepting the hand and pulling herself to her feet. "You too, MJ. I didn't think I'd be this worn out after just 2 fights." "Take it easy, Firestar," MJ said with a wink. "You've still got a couple more rounds to go." The others clapped and cheered as Lizzie and MJ rejoined the group, both of them singing a little but in good spirits. Felicia smirked as she stepped forward, her movements fluid and confident. She flexed her fingers, and her retractable claws extended with a soft snick. Her eyes locked onto Lizzie, assessing her with the precision of a seasoned fighter. Lizzie took a deep breath, focusing on the lingering warmth of her flames, knowing she'd need every ounce of energy to face Felicia. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion creeping into her muscles. Felicia didn't waste any time. She darted forward, moving with the grace and speed that came from years of experience, her enhanced agility making her a blur as she closed the distance between them. Lizzie braced herself, her flames flaring up defensively, but Felicia was already anticipating her move. In a flash, Felicia ducked under Lizzie's fiery swipe and delivered a quick, precise strike to her side with the flat of her hand, pulling her punch just enough to avoid causing serious damage. The impact was enough to knock the wind out of Lizzie, forcing her to stagger back. Before she could recover, Felicia was already moving, her claws slashing through the air in a series of rapid strikes. Lizzie managed to block most of the attacks with her fiery aura, but Felicia's relentless assault was overwhelming. The claws grazed her suit, leaving faint scorch marks where they made contact. Lizzie gritted her teeth, trying to keep up with Felicia's speed, but it was clear that Felicia had the upper hand in close combat. Felicia's spidey sense flared, and she suddenly leaped back just as Lizzie unleashed a powerful burst of flame from her hands. The flames roared forward, but Felicia twisted in midair, dodging the attack with ease. She landed lightly on her feet, already planning her next move. "You're quick," Lizzie admitted, panting slightly as she struggled to keep her flames under control. Felicia's eyes gleamed with amusement. "And you're strong, but you've got to be more than that if you want to win." Lizzie narrowed her eyes, knowing Felicia was right. She needed to change her strategy. Relying on raw power alone wasn't going to cut it against someone as skilled and experienced as Felicia. She took a deep breath, letting her flames die down slightly as she focused on conserving her energy. Felicia noticed the shift in Lizzie's stance and smiled. "That's more like it. Let's see how you handle this." With that, Felicia lunged forward again, but this time Lizzie was ready. Instead of trying to block or counter directly, she used her flames to propel herself upward, flipping over Felicia's head and landing gracefully behind her. As Felicia spun around to face her, Lizzie unleashed a controlled burst of flame, aiming not directly at Felicia but at the ground around her, creating a ring of fire that boxed her in. Felicia's eyes narrowed as she glanced at the flames surrounding her, but she didn't seem fazed. "Not bad," she said, her voice calm. "But fire won't stop me." Lizzie knew that, but she wasn't trying to stop Felicia, she was trying to slow her down. The heat from the flames would make it harder for Felicia to close in on her, buying Lizzie a few precious seconds to catch her breath and plan her next move. Felicia crouched low, her claws retracting as she prepared to leap through the flames. Lizzie saw the telltale tension in Felicia's muscles and knew she was about to strike. Instead of waiting, Lizzie went on the offensive. She thrust her hands forward, sending a concentrated stream of fire directly at Felicia, forcing her to either dodge or take the hit. Felicia's spidey sense flared again, and she instinctively twisted to the side, the flames barely missing her as they scorched the air where she had been standing. But Lizzie wasn't done yet. She immediately followed up with a sweeping kick, her leg wreathed in flames, aiming to catch Felicia off guard. This time, Felicia was caught off balance. The fiery kick connected with her midsection, sending her sprawling to the ground. Lizzie pressed her advantage, not giving Felicia a chance to recover as she launched another burst of flames at her downed opponent. But Felicia was far from out. She rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the flames, and sprang to her feet with cat-like reflexes. The moment she was upright, Felicia retaliated with a powerful backflip kick, aimed squarely at Lizzie's chest. Lizzie barely managed to raise her arms in time to block the kick, but the impact still sent her skidding backward, her feet digging into the ground as she tried to regain her balance. Felicia didn't let up. She dashed forward, her claws extending once more as she swiped at Lizzie with lightning speed. Lizzie was forced on the defensive, using her flames to create a barrier between herself and Felicia's relentless assault. The heat from the flames was intense, but Felicia's enhanced healing factor allowed her to push through the pain and continue her barrage of strikes. Realizing she couldn't keep up this defense for long, Lizzie decided to take a risk. She suddenly dropped her fiery shield and, with a burst of energy, launched herself directly at Felicia. The sudden move caught Felicia off guard. Lizzie's shoulder slammed into Felicia, knocking her off balance and sending them both tumbling to the ground. They rolled across the floor, each struggling for the upper hand. Felicia's claws flashed in the dim light, but Lizzie managed to catch her wrists, holding them at bay with a surge of strength fueled by desperation. Their faces were inches apart, both of them breathing heavily from the exertion. "You're stronger than I expected," Felicia admitted through gritted teeth, her eyes flashing with respect. "And you're tougher than I thought," Lizzie replied, her flames flickering around them as she held Felicia at bay. With a sudden twist, Felicia managed to free one hand and swiped at Lizzie, her claws raking across Lizzie's suit. Lizzie winced in pain, but she didn't let go. Instead, she gathered her remaining strength and unleashed a concentrated burst of flames directly at Felicia's midsection. Felicia gasped as the flames hit her, the heat searing through her suit. She instinctively recoiled, giving Lizzie the opening she needed to push her off. Lizzie scrambled to her feet, her flames burning brighter as she prepared for the final strike. Felicia, though scorched, was still standing, her breathing labored but her resolve unbroken. She looked at Lizzie, a grin forming on her face despite the burns. Felicia launched herself into the air, flipping over Lizzie's head and landing behind her. In a fluid motion, she spun around and delivered a sweeping kick to Lizzie's legs, knocking her off her feet. Before Lizzie could hit the ground, Felicia was on her, pinning her down with one hand while the other hovered over Lizzie's throat, claws extended. Lizzie froze, her flames sputtering out as she realized she was trapped. Felicia's grip was firm, but not painful, and the look in her eyes told Lizzie that she wouldn't actually harm her. Still, the message was clear: Felicia had won. Chapter 165, Third Person's POV. Lizzie was on the ground, panting from the intensity of her previous battles with Felicia, who had just gotten off her. She looked at Felicia with watery eyes and trembling lips. "Does that mean I'm not ready and would have to keep trying until I beat all of you?" she asked, her voice tinged with sadness and disappointment. Peter quickly stepped in, shaking his head. No way. You wouldn't have to do that. The goal isn't to beat all of us, but to gain our approval," he explained. Lizzie, despite her exhaustion, sat up excitedly. "Really?" Her expression quickly shifted to confusion. "Wait a minute, what's that supposed to mean?" she asked, sounding a bit offended. Peter crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. "Look, Lizzie, I understand you having a small chance of beating those three who just started training a month ago, but beating Gwen and me. That's a different story. It's pretty much impossible for you, no offense. No matter how many times those three challenge me, even when they team up, they haven't been able to defeat me." "Seriously?" Lizzie asked, wide-eyed. She glanced at Harry and the others. "You guys haven't been able to beat him?" Harry sighed in exasperation. "Peter's ridiculously fast and strong. It's almost impossible to land a hit on him. The only way we even get close is when Gwen slows him down with her ice, but since he took the super soldier serum, he's on a whole other level." Lizzie absorbed this information, her gaze shifting between Felicia, Gwen, and Peter. "So, does that mean I gained Felicia's approval and have to fight Gwen and Peter next to impress them?" she asked cautiously. Everyone turned to Felicia, waiting for her decision. After a moment, Felicia smirked and extended her hand. "You did put up a good fight, especially considering you were already tired from fighting Harry and MJ. Consider me impressed. I'll give you a pass." Lizzie's face lit up as she got to her feet, thrusting her arms into the air. "Hell yes," she exclaimed, celebrating her small victory. Gwen smiled at Lizzie, but her tone carried a warning. "You're going to need all the energy you can get when fighting me, so make sure you recuperate well. I'm going to test you to see how well you can fight against someone who's stronger than you, especially given your elemental disadvantage." Lizzie began to feel a bit nervous, chuckling awkwardly. Hee hee, any chance I can get a one-time skip? You know, like in those hard video games." Gwen's smile remained, but her resolve was clear. "Not when it comes to fighting me. We need to see if you're capable of fighting at a disadvantage. It's one of the most important things a hero has to be prepared for." With a resigned sigh, Lizzie gave up trying to persuade Gwen. "Fine, I'll take some proper rest." After some rest and utilizing the advanced medical options available in the lab, Lizzie had fully recovered. Now, she and Gwen stood face to face, ready for their match. Gwen adopted a martial arts stance, her fists glowing with an icy blue aura that released a cold wind. Snowflakes trailed behind her every movement. Lizzie hovered above the ground, surrounded by a red flaming aura, her determination burning just as hot. Without hesitation, Lizzie charged at Gwen with incredible speed, her fiery aura blazing. But to Gwen, everything seemed to move in slow motion. She dropped to one knee, raised her fist high as it glowed even brighter, and slammed it down onto the training ground just as Lizzie closed in. As Gwen's fist hit the ground, she unleashed a shockwave of cold energy that instantly snuffed out Lizzie's flaming aura. The sudden loss of her powers caused Lizzie to plummet, but she managed to roll and slide to one knee, looking up at Gwen in surprise. clearly not expecting such an overwhelming attack. But Gwen didn't give her a moment to recover. She immediately began skating towards Lizzie, her icy path forming beneath her feet as she closed the distance with alarming speed. She pivoted sharply, aiming a sweeping kick at Lizzie's midsection. Lizzie barely had time to react, throwing up her arms to block, but the force of Gwen's kick sent her sliding backward across the ground. Lizzie barely had time to react before Gwen was upon her once more. Thinking quickly, Lizzie activated her microwave manipulation, sending out a burst of heat in an attempt to thaw the ice closing in on her. The ground beneath Gwen began to sizzle and steam, but she was undeterred, her ice energy overpowering the rising heat. Lizzie, realizing she needed to change tactics, leaped backward, using her microwave energy to create a barrier of intense heat around herself. The air shimmered as the heat waves distorted the space between them. Gwen came to a stop, observing the barrier with a calculated gaze. The ice surrounding her fists intensified, turning her hands into sharp, crystalline gauntlets. Gwen launched herself forward, her ice-covered fists cutting through the superheated air like a knife through butter. Lizzie braced herself and concentrated her energy, focusing on a pinpoint burst of microwaves aimed directly at Gwen's path. As Gwen's fist drew near, Lizzie unleashed the burst, hoping to disrupt Gwen's attack. The clash of their powers caused an explosion of steam and frost, momentarily blinding both fighters. Or it should have if it wasn't for Gwen's enhanced spidey sense giving her a clear sight of everything. Gwen, with her spidey sense fully active, remained hyper-aware of Lizzie's every move. As Lizzie gathered heat energy, Gwen could feel the fluctuations in the air, the subtle shifts in temperature, and the slightest hints of movement even before they happened. When Lizzie charged at Gwen with her fiery aura, Gwen's senses screamed a warning. She instinctively sidestepped Lizzie's initial feint, predicting the real attack before it even came. With fluid precision, Gwen spun around Lizzie, her movements smooth and calculated, avoiding Lizzie's burst of microwave energy by the slimmest of margins. Lizzie's attack hit the ground instead, causing a small explosion of heat and debris. But Gwen was already in motion, leaping into the air to avoid the shockwave. She somersaulted gracefully, landing on a patch of undisturbed ground as the debris settled around her. Gwen didn't waste any time. As Lizzie used the smoke screen for cover, Gwen's spidey sense kept her one step ahead, tracking Lizzie's position through the chaos. When Lizzie attempted to close the distance, Gwen was ready. She swiftly pivoted, catching Lizzie's incoming kick with her ice-covered hand, the frost instantly spreading across Lizzie's leg. Lizzie gasped as the cold sapped the heat from her flames, but she didn't back down. She tried to use her microwave energy to heat up Gwen's ice and break free, but Gwen's grip was like iron. "You're fast, but you're not faster than my spidey sense," Gwen said, her voice calm and focused. Lizzie gritted her teeth, pouring more energy into her leg to melt the ice, but Gwen didn't give her the chance. With a powerful twist, Gwen threw Lizzie off balance, sending her stumbling backward. Gwen followed up with a rapid series of strikes, her icy fists leaving trails of frost in the air. Each punch was precise, aimed to disrupt Lizzie's flow and keep her on the defensive. Lizzie struggled to keep up, her movements becoming increasingly sluggish as Gwen's cold energy began to take its toll. Realizing she couldn't win by brute force, Lizzie decided to try one last desperate maneuver. She focused all her remaining energy into a concentrated microwave blast, aiming to push Gwen back and create some distance. But Gwen's spidey sense flared once more, alerting her to the incoming attack. She anticipated Lizzie's move and leaped high into the air, avoiding the blast entirely. As she descended, Gwen gathered her ice energy into a single, powerful strike. With a sharp cry, Gwen slammed her fist into the ground just as Lizzie looked up. The impact created a shockwave of cold that radiated out in all directions, freezing the ground solid and sending a wave of frost straight toward Lizzie. The wave of cold hit Lizzie before she could react, encasing her legs in ice and extinguishing her flames. She fell to the ground, unable to move, her energy completely drained. Gwen landed gracefully in front of her, her fist still glowing with icy energy. Lizzie looked up at Gwen, breathing heavily, although she was unable to continue fighting. Her eyes showed none of that. Gwen knelt down beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did great, Lizzie," Gwen said softly, her earlier intensity gone. This was mostly a test to see if you would give up when the odds are stacked against you and you had no hope of winning. As a hero you lose only when you give up, which you didn't, so good job. Lizzie managed a weak smile, nodding in understanding. "I'll keep that in mind." Thanks, Gwen. Gwen helped Lizzie to her feet, the ice around her legs melting away. As they walked back to the others, Spiderbots flew into action and began fixing the training ground while Lizzie recuperated once more. This time everyone had their lunch as they relaxed. And once Lizzie was back to full strength once more, it was time for Lizzie's final and hardest challenge. Her against Peter. Peter simply looked laid back and didn't even get into a fighting stance as he put a hand on his chin in a pondering manner. Lizzie, who was already in her stance, looked towards Peter in confusion. What are you doing? Thinking. Peter said, how I'm going to beat you, there's just too many ways I can go about this, it's hard to choose only one. Peter simply then sat down and sat cross-legged. Well, you can go ahead while I think of a funny way to beat you. Lizzie grew irritated at all his jabs and comments just now. Alright, since you gave me the go-ahead, she said as she flew towards her at a fast pace, with a cautious approach as she knew Peter was extremely strong. As she swung her fist, Peter casually leaned back as he still held his chin in a pondering manner, causing Lizzie to miss completely. Now how can I go about this? Peter said, completely ignoring her. Lizzie rapidly spun around and kicked towards his direction, causing Peter to just lay on the floor with his hands behind his head. I can do that, but no, that's too boring. Lizzie was quickly getting annoyed by how casual Peter was being about their match. It didn't help that the spectators were chuckling. Peter, still lounging on the ground, didn't seem remotely concerned as Lizzie prepared to attack him. He shifted onto his stomach, his chin propped up in his hands, legs kicking lazily in the air as he watched Lizzie prepare to attack. His relaxed demeanor was infuriating to Lizzie, who was ready to give it her all. With a burst of speed, Lizzie dashed toward him, fist blazing with fiery energy. Just as her punch was about to connect, Peter nonchalantly rolled out of the way, but instead of stopping there, he kept rolling, and rolling, and rolling, until he was upside down, his feet somehow balancing on the ceiling, hands on his hips like he was surveying his work. Lizzie skidded to a stop, staring at him in disbelief. Why? Physics is wild, huh? Peter interrupted, grinning down at her, upside down. I'm just hanging around, you know. Lizzie charged again, but Peter suddenly flipped himself off the ceiling, landing gracefully on his feet. He then did a goofy dance, moonwalking backward as Lizzie threw a series of rapid punches. Each time she swung, Peter danced out of the way, barely breaking a sweat. You've got moves, Lizzie, Peter said, spinning around with a silly twirl, but can you keep up with these? He started doing an exaggerated Charleston dance, easily dodging her strikes while moving in rhythm to an imaginary beat. Lizzie's frustration grew, and she launched a powerful kick aimed at his head. Peter suddenly dropped to the floor, into a split while yelling like Michael Jackson. The kick sailed harmlessly over him, and he looked up at her with a smirk. You know, I've heard of being grounded, but this is ridiculous, Peter joked, still completely at ease. Lizzie, refusing to give up, tried to blast him with a wave of fiery energy. Peter responded by flipping up into a handstand, balancing on one hand while the other was outstretched like he was holding a surfboard. He pretended to surf, making exaggerated whoosh sounds as he effortlessly dodged the wave of energy. Cowabunga, dude! Peter exclaimed, grinning like a kid with his thumb and pinky stretched out, shaking them a bit. Lizzie blinked, utterly bewildered. Before she could react, Peter suddenly flipped off his hand, landing on his feet, but with his hands on the ground and his feet in the air, as if he were doing a very exaggerated, upside-down walk. He walked toward her like this, looking completely at ease. Am I coming or going? Who knows? Peter quipped, now pretending to tip an invisible hat with his foot. Lizzie threw everything she had at him, a flurry of kicks, punches, and blasts. Peter responded by cartwheeling around her, somehow ending up sitting cross-legged on her shoulders, using her head like a comfortable cushion. He leaned over, looking down at her with a playful smile. Nice view from up here, he said, completely unfazed. Get off. Lizzie yelled, spinning to shake him off. Peter flipped off with a casual somersault, landing on a nearby table. He picked up an apple from the table where the others were watching, took a bite, and leaned back as if he were watching a casual game instead of participating in a fight. Lizzie, panting and exasperated, fired one last blast of energy at him. Peter simply hopped off the table, letting the blast hit the apple he had just been holding, turning it to ash. He looked at the apple, then at Lizzie, and shook his head in mock disappointment. That was my lunch, he said, sounding offended but with a playful glint in his eyes. By now, Lizzie was breathing heavily, her energy nearly spent. Peter finally straightened up, walking over to her as if nothing had happened. He gave her a friendly pat on the shoulder. Nice try, Lizzie. But you might want to practice dodging first. You know, it's kind of fun, Peter said with a wink. Lizzie stared at him, half angry, half impressed, as Peter casually strolled back to the others, waving over his shoulder like they'd just had a friendly sparring session. The group burst out laughing, thoroughly entertained by the ridiculous display. Lizzie, still catching her breath, made a mental note to find a way to keep up with Peter's antics next time. Peter smirked, looking at Lizzie with a playful glint in his eye. Tell me, what do you think I was trying to teach you throughout all of that? He asked casually. Lizzie blinked a few times, her expression shifting from confusion to irritation. That you're an annoying asshole with no possible cure of ever getting back to normal, she retorted. Felicia scoffed, crossing her arms. Ain't that the truth? Peter turned towards Felicia with a mock-hurt expression. Really, Kat? From you? Gwen or Harry, I would understand, but you? I'm a bit hurt. Felicia rolled her eyes, a smirk tugging at her lips. So are we going to pretend that last night didn't happen? Ignoring Felicia's jab, Peter turned back to Lizzie, his expression suddenly serious. What I was trying to teach you is that there will be enemies who will try to get under your skin in more ways than one. You need to learn to ignore them and control your emotions, or they will most likely succeed. Lizzie was taken aback by the sudden shift in tone. I see. I understand why you were behaving that way then. Although it's an odd way to do it, I get what you're trying to tell me. I would have had a better chance if I just stayed focused instead of leading with my emotions. Everyone froze at her insight, except for Felicia, who shot Peter the dirtiest side eye. Peter nodded, his expression softening. Yeah. Honestly, for you to understand that is impressive in itself. Consider yourself passed. Just as Lizzie was about to celebrate, red lights began flashing in the training room, causing everyone to freeze and react with alarm. Arya, what's going on? Peter asked as he quickly stood up, his playful demeanor gone. A hologram appeared in front of them, Arya's voice filled with urgency. This video was just taken by Greyburn College. The footage showed a man being forcibly restrained and wheeled away by the military, strapped down to a bed. Bruce Banner has been taken by the military, Arya announced. I repeat, Bruce Banner has been taken by the military. Dad instructed me to declare a code red if this event ever occurred. So, code red, Bruce Banner has been taken by the military. Peter let out a sigh, his face grim. Well, fuck, this is such a terrible first day on the job mission for you, Lizzie. The room was filled with a tense silence, everyone exchanging worried looks. Code red was never a good sign, and the gravity of the situation was unclear. What's going on? And what's the deal with his Bruce Banner, why is he in code red? Lizzie asked worriedly, noticing everyone was shifting into action. He's none other than the Hulk. Chapter 166, Chapter 166, Third Person's POV. Peter and the others quickly suited up, grabbing all their gadgets and heading out the door. With swift movements, they began swinging through the city, with Firestar flying above them, her excitement barely contained as she embarked on her first real mission. So, who's this Hulk? Spider-Cat asked as they swung rapidly through the busy city streets. Onlookers, already surprised by the superhero team, were even more astonished to see a new addition. He's a scientist named Bruce Banner, Spider-Man explained as they zipped through the air. After an accident involving gamma radiation, he developed a green monstrous alter ego known as the Hulk. The problem is, the angrier he gets, the stronger he becomes, without any known limit. That's insane, Nightwing responded, surprised. So the military wants to use his unlimited strength or something? Firestar asked, just as surprised as Nightwing. More than that, Spider-Man said, his tone grim. They want to replicate it and mass-produce it. Why am I not surprised? Scarlet Spider grumbled. Then we have no time to waste, Ghost Spider said, her expression growing serious as the situation sank in. Wait, how do you know so much about the Hulk? Firestar asked as they rounded a corner. SHIELD has been monitoring him since his first emergence, Spider-Man replied quickly. As the team arrived at Greyhound College, they were greeted by the sight of a massive pillar of smoke and fire, accompanied by the sound of gunfire and the screams of men. Ghost, you're with me, Spider-Man instructed, already strategizing. Nightwing, Scarlet, and Cat, I want you three to focus on evacuating the entire street. Get people out of their homes if you have to. I don't want any civilians around who could become casualties. Firestar, control the flames and make sure they don't spread. Be ready for when I give you the signal. Signal? What signal? For what? Firestar asked, her confusion evident. You'll know when the time comes, Spider-Man replied, his voice steady as he leapt towards a nearby roof. From there, he shot 2 webs toward different buildings, pulling back slightly as he focused on where he heard the explosion. Though he couldn't see anything in front of him, Spider-Man launched himself forward like a slingshot, soaring through the air just as a giant dirt-green monster with fins on the side of its head and a bone-like sail from his back, the Abomination, jumped from one building to another, meeting him mid-air. The collision was intense, with Spider-Man tackling the giant green Abomination, knocking the air out of its massive body. Acting quickly, Spider-Man shot webs toward the ground, pulling the Abomination down to the street, preventing him from flying off and crashing into people below. Hey, ugly so, which cursed you? Spider-Man taunted as the impact created a miniature earthquake, destroying the road beneath them. The force of the collision sent shockwaves through the area, causing buildings to start crumbling and people to fall. Cars swerved dangerously as drivers lost control. But Scarlet Spider and Spider-Cat acted swiftly, flying around to web down the buildings and secure the people inside. Meanwhile, Nightwing darted between vehicles, stopping cars from crashing and keeping the people on the streets safe from accidents. Firestar flew into the burning college, the intense heat radiating from the flames threatening to overwhelm anyone inside. But she remained calm, using her abilities to siphon the heat from the flames, weakening them and causing the fire to slowly die out. Once the flames were under control, she began guiding the panicked students and staff out of the building, her voice firm yet reassuring as she led them to safety. However, due to her inexperience, she missed on Survivor, who was buried by a large computer that was toppled over him due to the constant explosions and shockwave. He was knocked unconscious, however his head grew larger and larger while slowly turning green. Outside, the battle raged on. As Spider-Man pressed the Abomination down, embedding him into the ground, the creature let out a fierce, guttural roar that echoed through the streets. Spider-Man winced in pain, his senses heightened to the point where the roar felt like a physical assault. The Abomination took advantage of this moment, slamming both fists into the ground and propelling its massive body upwards. But before the Abomination could fully regain its footing, Ghost Spider swung in, delivering a powerful dropkick that sent the hulking monster flying backward. Nightwing, moving at incredible speed, blurred through the battlefield, clearing the path by moving civilians and military soldiers out of harm's way. The Abomination tumbled along the road, using its enormous hands to slow its momentum and shake off the disorientation. Once it regained its bearings, the creature let out another deafening roar and ripped a massive piece of concrete from the ground. With a furious swing, it hurled the chunk of debris towards Spider-Man and Ghost Spider. Before the concrete could reach them, 2 web strings shot through the air, attaching themselves to the debris. With a powerful yank, the webs pulled the concrete back towards the Abomination. But instead of being deterred, the creature simply headbutted the incoming concrete, shattering it into rubble. Turning to face the source of the webs, the Abomination saw Nightwing standing a short distance away, his expression caught between determination and slight disbelief. I definitely thought that would have done more damage, not gonna lie, Nightwing admitted, his voice carrying a hint of nervousness. The Abomination responded with another roar and charged at Nightwing, its massive footsteps causing the ground to tremble with each stride. Ah, this is actually quite terrifying to look at up close, Nightwing muttered, his words at odds with his actions as he sprinted directly towards the charging beast. As the 2 forces collided, Nightwing deftly dodged to the side at the last moment, using his acrobatics and agility to avoid the Abomination's powerful swings. He leaped onto the creature's arm, running up its massive frame before vaulting over its head and landing behind it. With fluid precision, Nightwing launched a series of quick, calculated strikes aimed at the Abomination's pressure points. Though the attacks didn't seem to do much more than annoy the beast, Nightwing's movements kept the creature off balance, giving his teammates precious time to regroup. Seeing an opening, Spider-Man shot a web at the Abomination's back, anchoring it to the ground as Ghost Spider did the same from the front. They pulled in opposite directions, to keep the straining creature immobilized. Firestar, now! Spider-Man shouted, signaling the moment they had been waiting for. From her position above, Firestar unleashed a concentrated energy beam, fueled by the radiation she had absorbed during her sparring matches. The beam struck the beast head-on with a powerful force, driving it into the ground. The abomination sank deeper and deeper into the earth until Firestar's stored energy was exhausted. A tense silence followed as Firestar, catching her breath, asked, "So that was the Hulk? Talk about terrifying." "Unfortunately, it wasn't," Spider-Man replied grimly, causing his teammates to snap their heads toward him in shock, their eyes wide. "What?" they all shouted in unison. "Then what the hell was that?" Scarlet Spider demanded from her perch atop a webbed building. "The Hulk is bright green and doesn't have fins. What we just fought was likely a failed attempt to replicate the Hulk. It's more like an abomination," Spider-Man explained just as a massive green hand shot out from the sinkhole with a loud thud, followed by another. "Nailed the timing, hell yeah," Spider-Man thought proudly to himself. The creature slowly pulled itself up, prompting some of the heroes to take a step back. They watched in horror as it climbed out of the crater, its chest and stomach scorched and torn open, blood spilling everywhere, but the wounds were already healing. "It doesn't matter how many of you bugs keep coming after me," the abomination growled, surprising them all as they hadn't expected it to speak. "I will always be stronger," it roared as the last of its wounds closed. Actually, spiders are arachnids," Spider-Man quipped in a nerdy voice. "Dude, not the time," Nightwing began, but his words were cut off by the sickening crunch of bones snapping. Everyone froze and slowly turned toward the sound, finding a man lying flat on the ground with his limbs twisted at unnatural angles. For a moment, no one moved, not even the abomination. The only sound was the distant whir of a helicopter from which the men had jumped. "Did he just?" Spider-Cat began, disbelief in her voice. "Yeah," Spider-Man confirmed. Then, to their horror, the man's limbs started shifting back into place with a series of gruesome crunches. His skin turned a vivid green as he began to grow in size. Slowly, he rose to one knee, his shirt tearing away as his muscles expanded and his pants stretched to accommodate his increasing mass. The figure stood at about 8 feet tall, eyes glowing with an eerie green light, and then it unleashed a primal roar that made the very air tremble with its power. "That," Spider-Man said, his voice laced with awe, "that right there is the Hulk." As everyone felt their instincts screaming at them to run, Spider-Man couldn't help but geek out a bit and think, that was freaking awesome. The abomination smirked upon seeing the Hulk, while the Hulk simply huffed like an enraged bull. The two titans stood at opposite ends of the battlefield, with Spider-Man and his friends caught in the middle of their impending clash. Slowly, the two beasts began to advance toward each other. Their pace quickened from a walk to a jog, and then a full-on sprint, the ground quaking beneath their massive footsteps. Spider-Man's spidey sense flared, giving him a glimpse of the catastrophic destruction that would ensue if the two creatures collided head-on. His face paled as he realized the severity of the situation. The movies seriously downplayed their destructive capabilities. If they crash with the strength they both have, the shockwave alone would be unimaginable. Hundreds could die just from the impact. "Ghost Spider, stop the abomination!" Spider-Man shouted urgently as he sprinted toward the Hulk. The Hulk, noticing Spider-Man charging toward him with clear intent, raised both fists high into the air. No one stops the Hulk. Hulk smash! As the Hulk brought his fists down with devastating force, Spider-Man caught them, one in each hand. The impact sent a shockwave of raw power surging through his body, causing his insides to churn. Spider-Man channeled the immense force down through his legs, releasing it into the ground. The asphalt exploded outward, and a massive crater formed beneath them, sending nearby buildings tipping precariously. With a display of his superior strength, Spider-Man pulled the Hulk's fists apart, catching the green giant off guard. "Listen, Hulk, you can't fight him here. Not in a city full of people. You'll be putting countless lives at risk. Look around you, at the destruction the abomination has already caused. Now imagine what would happen if you two collided head-on. You're not a killer, Hulk. Let us help you. We'll take the abomination out of the city, to a place far away from people where you can fight to your heart's content. What do you say, big guy?" The Hulk growled, his rage palpable. But as he heard the sincerity in Spider-Man's voice, he paused and looked around at the devastation surrounding them. Spider-Man released the Hulk's fists and held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "What do you say, big guy?" he asked again, his voice calm but urgent. The moment Spider-Man's words registered with the Hulk, the Green Giant's immense fists unclenched, and a flicker of understanding passed through his enraged eyes. Spider-Man's voice had broken through the storm of fury, reminding him of the innocent lives at stake. Spider-Man took a step back, electricity crackling around him like a living storm as he readied himself. The city around them was a scene of chaos, buildings crumbled, fires blazed, and the streets were littered with debris. Yet, Spider-Man's focus remained unwavering. "Everyone, let's move!" Spider-Man shouted, his voice cutting through the clamor. The heroes sprung into action. Ghost Spider, Nightwing, Spider-Cat, and Scarlet Spider tightened their grip on the Abomination, their combined powers barely holding back completely. With a burst of speed, Spider-Man launched himself forward, the sheer force of his movement ripping through the air. He struck the Abomination with a blow so powerful it echoed like a thunderclap. The impact caused the hulking beast to vomit blood and sent him hurtling through the sky, breaking the sound barrier as he soared away from the city. For the first time using his 200-ton strength for something. The others wasted no time, shooting webs to latching onto the flying Abomination to not lose him in a coordinated pursuit. The cityscape blurred around them as they soared through the air, focused entirely on the task at hand. Spider-Man reached the Abomination first as when he punched the Abomination he stuck his fist to its stomach allowing him to be carried, Spider-Man delivering another bone-rattling punch that redirected the monster's flight path, and caused the beast's eyes to whiten slightly due to the force. Ghost Spider followed up, swinging in from above to slam the Abomination with a powerful kick, further propelling him out of the city. Nightwing, with his acrobatic precision, landed a barrage of explosive gadgets that detonated around the beast, keeping him disoriented, all those explosions keeping the momentum alive. Spider-Cat and Scarlet Spider were relentless, their combined efforts landing blows that sent shockwaves through the air, each hit pushing the Abomination further away from the city's limits. They would punch and web the Abomination repeatedly. The heroes coordinated their strikes with precision, ensuring that the Abomination had no chance to recover or retaliate. As they neared the outskirts of the city, Firestar delivered one final, devastating explosion. The others backed off as she supercharged the air with microwave energy, creating a thunderous explosion that sent the Abomination crashing into an open canyon, miles away from the nearest building. The ground trembled from the impact, but there were no more buildings to fall, no more people at risk. The Hulk arrived moments later, landing with a thunderous impact beside the Abomination. He let out a deep growl, his massive fists clenched with barely restrained fury. Spider-Man landed nearby, with a sigh of relief and standing tall. "Here you go, big guy," he said, gesturing to the open land around them. "Just like I promised, you can fight him without putting anyone else in danger." The Hulk looked at Spider-Man, then down at the Abomination, who was already starting to rise from the crater he'd created, grunting from the pain and vomiting blood continuously while he slowly healed. The Hulk gave a final, grateful nod to Spider-Man. The Hulk roared, his eyes blazing with rage as he leaped toward his foe, ready to unleash his fury in a battle that would no longer threaten innocent lives. As the Hulk and Abomination clashed, Spider-Man and the others stood back, prepared to step in if needed but confident that they had done their part. The city was safe, and now the Hulk could fight with all his might. Chapter 167, Third Person's POV. The Hulk ran towards the Abomination who was still getting up. Hulk grabbed him by the face and began dragging him through the rocky surface of the canyon with a roar. The Abomination gritted his teeth from the pain, but with quick thinking he swung his arms and slammed his palm on both ears of the Hulk, releasing a thunderous sound. Blood burst from the Hulk's ears as his eardrums burst. He released the Abomination and held his ears in pain. ROAAAAAAHH. The Hulk unleashed a pained roar as he held his ears. He swayed and struggled with putting one foot in front of the other, causing him to tumble as his balance was messed up. The Abomination sat up and spit blood to the side alongside some teeth from the earlier assault. He got up with a scoff as his wounds healed, but unfortunately he wasn't the only one. Hulk's eardrum regenerated back as he let out an enraged roar. "You hurt, Hulk. You will pay." The Hulk stood up and charged towards the Abomination, with the Abomination doing the same. They both shot their first at a fast capacity, and as their fists met in the middle, a shockwave erupted from them as the source. Rocks and boulders went flying everywhere as the ground was ripped apart, forming a crater. Spider-Man and the others stuck their feet to the ground and clung on so they wouldn't be washed away, but they were even close to being forced to be ripped away, while Firestar flew against the shockwave. Like explosion, the Hulk and Abomination's fist began colliding into each other. The clash between the Hulk and the Abomination was nothing short of titanic. Each blow they exchanged sent shockwaves rippling through the canyon, shattering rocks and tearing the ground apart as if it were paper. The raw power on display was almost incomprehensible, as these two behemoths of strength and rage battled for dominance. The Hulk, driven by his fury, launched a powerful uppercut that sent the Abomination staggering back. But before Hulk could press the advantage, the Abomination countered with a brutal kick to Hulk's midsection, sending him skidding across the rocky terrain. Hulk recovered quickly, the pain only fueling his anger. He charged back, ducking under a wild swing from the Abomination and ramming his shoulder into the creature's chest, lifting him off the ground and slamming him into the side of a cliff. The impact caused an avalanche of rocks to rain down, but neither Titan was deterred. The Abomination snarled and grabbed a massive boulder, smashing it over Hulk's head. The force of the blow caused the ground beneath them to crack and splinter, but Hulk barely flinched. His eyes glowed with pure rage as he ripped the boulder apart with his bare hands, using the jagged pieces as weapons to pummel the Abomination. The battle raged on. The Hulk had grabbed the Abomination by the arm and swung him around like a rag doll, slamming him into the ground repeatedly. The Abomination roared in pain and fury, finally breaking free with a powerful backhand that sent Hulk crashing into the canyon wall. Both Titans were bleeding, bruised, and battered, but neither showed any signs of stopping. Their relentless assault on each other seemed to be driven by a primal need to prove their dominance, and the surrounding landscape bore the scars of their titanic struggle. As the two charged at each other once more, fists raised for another earth-shattering collision, the sound of a helicopter was heard with the rumbling of what appeared to be tanks and other vehicles. "What the hell are they doing here?" Scarlet Spider asked in shock. Even Spider-Cat clicked her tongue in annoyance. "Don't they know we took them away so no one would be hurt? They're just putting themselves in necessary danger." Meanwhile, the Abomination closed his hands together into a fist and slammed it across the Hulk's face, sending him flying back onto the other side of a cliff. Giant body outline on the rock formation. Hulk roared, the sound echoing through the canyon like a shockwave. He burst out of the crater with raw, unrestrained power, his eyes burning with a fury that made even the Abomination hesitate for a split second. That hesitation was all the Hulk needed. With a speed that belied his massive frame, Hulk lunged forward, his fist rocketing toward the Abomination's chest. The impact was like a thunderclap, sending ripples through the air and cracking the earth beneath them. The Abomination's ribs caved under the force, his breath coming out in a painful, wheezing gasp as he was thrown backward, smashing into the ground with such force that it created a deep crater. But the Abomination wasn't down for long. He clawed his way out of the crater, his healing factor already working to repair the damage. With a snarl, he charged at the Hulk, using his powerful legs to propel himself forward like a freight train. The ground trembled under his weight as he barreled into the Hulk, catching him off guard and driving him back. The Hulk snarled, his feet digging into the ground as he fought to hold his ground against the relentless assault. With a mighty heave, he grabbed the Abomination by the shoulders and swung him around, slamming him into the canyon wall with such force that the entire cliff face shuddered and cracked, rocks raining down in a deadly cascade. As the dust settled, the Abomination emerged from the rubble, blood streaming down his face, his body covered in cuts and bruises. But his eyes were alight with a savage determination. He leaped at the Hulk, who met him midair with a punch that sent shockwaves through the canyon. The two Titans collided, their fists connecting in a blinding flash of power. The canyon walls groaned and cracked under the pressure of the battle, debris raining down as the landscape was torn apart by the sheer force of their blows. The Abomination managed to gain the upper hand for a moment, grabbing the Hulk by the throat and lifting him off the ground. With a vicious growl, he slammed the Hulk into the ground, creating yet another crater. But as he prepared to deliver a finishing blow, the Hulk's hand shot up, grabbing the Abomination's arm in a vice-like grip. With a roar of defiance, the Hulk twisted the Abomination's arm, the sound of bones snapping like dry twigs echoing through the canyon. The Abomination howled in pain, but the Hulk didn't relent. He surged to his feet, using his momentum to flip the Abomination over his shoulder and slam him into the ground with a devastating suplex. The impact was catastrophic. The ground buckled under the force, creating a massive fissure that spread out from the point of impact. The Abomination lay there, dazed and broken, his body struggling to heal from the damage. But the Hulk wasn't done. He stood over the Abomination, his chest heaving with ragged breaths, his entire body trembling with barely contained rage. He lifted his foot, preparing to stomp down with enough force to end the battle once and for all. Before he could, a booming voice echoed through the canyon, amplified by a megaphone. "Stand down. This is your final warning." Hulk hesitated, his foot hovering above the abomination. The voice continued, in a threatening and authoritative manner. "We can end this peacefully. Or we can not, upon which we will begin to open fire." Tanks rolled into view, their cannons trained on the two giants. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades slicing through the air with an ominous hum. Soldiers fanned out across the canyon, weapons at the ready. Firestar hovered in the air, her eyes darting between the Hulk and the encroaching military. "We have to do something. If this escalates any further," but before she could finish, the Hulk let out a deafening roar, his rage overriding any semblance of reason. He brought his foot down with earth-shattering force, but the abomination, fueled by sheer willpower, rolled out of the way just in time. The ground where the Hulk's foot landed exploded in a cloud of dust and debris, obscuring everything from view. When the dust settled, the Hulk was standing in a massive crater, his chest heaving with exertion, his eyes locked on the abomination, who was struggling to get back to his feet. As the military realized the futility of negotiation, they opened fire. The sky was filled with the deafening roar of helicopters, their rotors slicing through the air as they unleashed a relentless hailstorm of bullets, missiles, and heavy artillery. The ground shook under the impact of explosions as shells and rockets were fired with precision, intent on bringing down the colossal forces of the Hulk and Abomination. But before the onslaught could reach its targets, a streak of black and blue, intertwined with crackling electricity, cut through the chaos like a blade. Spider-Man, his body coursing with electric energy, zipped through the air with unmatched agility. His every movement left behind a trail of crackling lightning, the arcs of energy dancing across his suit as he intercepted bullets with impossibly quick reflexes. Each missile that thundered toward the giants was snatched out of the air by his webbing, which crackled and snapped with electric force. With a swift flick of his wrists, Spider-Man dismantled the missiles mid-flight, their explosive power rendered harmless. Beside him, Nightwing moved like a shadow, a blur of acrobatic precision. His eskrima sticks flashed as he deflected bullets with ease, sending them ricocheting harmlessly into the air. With a powerful leap, he intercepted a barrage of rockets from the helicopters, his hands catching them mid-air. In one smooth motion, he redirected them toward the ground, the warheads buried deep before they could detonate. As the relentless barrage ceased, the two heroes emerged from the smoke and debris, unscathed and unwavering. Nightwing, holding a tank shell in one hand and a cluster of mangled rockets in the other, surveyed the scene with a steely gaze. Spider-Man, electricity still sparking off his suit, gripped two large missiles in his hands, the remnants of the military's assault now rendered inert. They stood as a formidable shield before the Hulk and Abomination, their presence a clear signal to the U.S. military. This battle was far from over, and brute force alone would not prevail. Without a word, Nightwing clenched his fist around the shell, causing it to explode. The explosion engulfed his face, but when the smoke cleared, he was unharmed, a look of calm defiance in his eyes. Meanwhile, Spider-Man began a slow, deliberate walk toward the tanks and the general, who was standing in front of them on a military vehicle. The explosive battle between Hulk and Abomination raged on behind him, but Spider-Man paid it no mind. As he walked, he supercharged the missiles in his hands with his bioelectricity, causing them to detonate. The explosions engulfed his hands, yet Spider-Man continued forward unscathed. The general, a stern figure with a hardened expression, stepped down from the vehicle and advanced toward Spider-Man, flanked by soldiers with weapons trained on the hero. Spider-Man and the general stopped inches apart, tension crackling in the air between them as the world around them seemed to fade into the background. "Spider-Man," the general addressed him coldly, his eyes narrowing. "Ross," Spider-Man replied, matching his tone with equal frost. "That's general to you," Ross snapped. "Earn it," Spider-Man shot back, his voice low and edged with contempt. Ross stepped closer, his face only an inch from Spider-Man's. "What was that?" he demanded, his voice a dangerous whisper. "You heard me," Spider-Man whispered back, their faces now almost touching. "Earn it." The general's eyes flashed with anger. "You see, Ross, respect is earned, not demanded, nor given freely," Spider-Man continued. "And you've done nothing so far for me to give you that respect. Quite the opposite, in fact. You should be grateful I'm even talking to you." Ross's face twisted with frustration. "You fear nothing, neither the law, the military, nor the consequences of your actions. That makes you a dangerous man, a threat to the state. The only thing here that's dangerous and threatening is your ambition for power, Spider-Man retorted, his voice dripping with disdain. You're willing to do anything to gain more control, to have everything under your thumb. And I'll be damned if I let that happen. The law, the military, the consequences, even the state, won't stop me from preventing dangerous powers from falling into your hands, where you'll only endanger more lives. Ross's face reddened with fury. It is for the betterment of our country, he bellowed, his voice booming through the tense air. It's for the betterment of yourself and nothing else. Spider-Man shouted back, his voice filled with righteous anger. The words hung in the air between them, a declaration of intent that neither could ignore. Chapter 168, Third Person's POV, Father, stop this immediately. The loud shout cut through the chaos of the battlefield, causing both Spider-Man and General Ross to instinctively turn toward the source of the voice. Betty Ross, the daughter of Thunderbolt Ross, was standing on the edge of a helicopter as it descended, her face a mixture of determination and concern. The Hulk, who had been locked in a brutal fight with the Abomination, froze as the familiar voice reached his ears. His green, rage-filled eyes softened for a moment as he recognized the woman who had called out to him. Betty. He rumbled softly, the single word holding a wealth of emotion. But the Abomination, seeing his chance, took advantage of the Hulk's distraction. With a powerful punch, he struck the Hulk across the face, sending him crashing to the ground. The sudden force, combined with the calming effect of Betty's presence, caused the Hulk to momentarily lose consciousness. The Abomination, seeing his enemy down, smirked smugly, gloating over his apparent victory. However, his moment of triumph was short-lived. The Hulk's eyes suddenly snapped open, his pupils dilating with a burning, uncontrollable rage. Roa! The Hulk roared, surging to his feet with renewed fury. His muscles swelled as he grew taller, the rage within him fueling his power. Without a moment's hesitation, he delivered a devastating punch to the Abomination's face, lifting the monstrous creature off the ground with the sheer force of the blow. In a display of overwhelming strength, the Hulk slammed the Abomination's head into the ground, creating a crater from the impact. The Abomination lay unconscious, but the Hulk was far from finished. Letting out another roar, he leaped high into the air, soaring past the helicopters before plummeting back down like a meteor. He landed on the Abomination with bone-crushing force, causing the creature to howl in pain as he snapped back to consciousness. Sitting on top of the Abomination, the Hulk unleashed a savage barrage of punches. His fists, covered in green blood, rained down with relentless fury, turning the battlefield into a scene of carnage. Blood flew everywhere, covering the Hulk's skin in a gruesome layer that wasn't his own. Each punch seemed more ferocious than the last, driven by a primal need to protect those he cared about. But in his blind rage, the Hulk didn't notice Betty approaching. When he felt a hand on his back, he swung his fist in a powerful backhand, intending to swat away the perceived threat. Ghost Spider, who had quickly intervened, caught the Hulk's fist just in time, preventing it from landing. With one arm, she held Betty close, shielding her from the force of the shockwave that rippled outwards, causing Betty's hair to whip around wildly. "Careful, big guy," Ghost Spider said softly, her voice soothing. That could have gone bad. The Hulk's eyes widened in horror as he realized what had almost happened. "Hulk almost hurt Betty," he said, his voice trembling with guilt. "Hulk almost hurt Hulk's friend." Betty stepped forward, ignoring her father's angry shouts. She smiled gently at the Hulk, extending her hand toward him. "It's all right. I know you didn't mean it. It was an accident, right?" Ghost Spider, sensing the personal nature of the moment, stepped back, giving them space while staying close enough to intervene if necessary. The Hulk hesitated for a moment, then slowly met Betty's hand with his own massive one. Hulk doesn't like to see Betty hurt. Hulk is ashamed. Betty squeezed his hand reassuringly. "I'm all right, aren't I?" Meanwhile, General Ross seethed with frustration, his jaw clenched as he watched the scene unfold. He hated seeing his daughter so close to the Hulk, knowing the danger she was in. Yet, despite his anger and fear, he could do nothing but watch as the monster he despised showed more humanity than he ever expected. Betty's gentle touch and soothing words seemed to calm the Hulk, his enormous frame gradually relaxing. The rage in his eyes dimmed as he focused entirely on her, the blood on his hands and the destruction around him momentarily forgotten. "Betty, safe," Hulk rumbled, his voice filled with both relief and sorrow. "Yes, I'm safe," Betty reassured him, her voice soft and caring. She squeezed his hand, trying to convey all the comfort she could. You don't need to be ashamed, Hulk. You saved everyone. Hulk blinked, his massive brow furrowing as if trying to understand her words. Hulk, saved. Yes, Betty affirmed, nodding. You stopped the abomination. You protected people. For a moment, the Hulk remained silent, his gaze locked on Betty's. Slowly, his massive green shoulders slumped as the tension drained from his body. The monstrous anger that had driven him moments ago ebbed away, leaving a more subdued and almost childlike version of the Hulk. Ghost Spider watched the scene unfold, a small, relieved smile on her face. She knew how dangerous the situation had been, but seeing how Betty managed to calm the Hulk reminded her of the humanity that still existed within the creature. General Ross, however, was less convinced. He marched forward, his face a mix of anger and desperation. Betty, get away from that thing. I won't lose you to it. Betty turned sharply to her father, her eyes flashing with defiance. He's not a thing, Dad. He's a person. Bruce is still in there. And he's not a monster, he just needs help. Think about your next actions very carefully, Ross. Spider-Man had warned as his superior spidey sense had let him see Ross' next move, but it was clear the general had made up his mind. The web-slinger's mind raced as he assessed the rapidly deteriorating situation. I have no time for your threats, Spider-Man. I'll rescue my daughter from that monster even if I have to go through your little group of friends. Not to mention, the Hulk was already planning on handing himself over to the government, thus that makes him property of the government. You're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, Ross declared, his tone harsh and unyielding. Spider-Man's response was immediate, his voice firm. Bruce Banner gave himself up to the government, not the Hulk. And need I remind you, Ross, people aren't property. Slavery was abolished ages ago. Ross's eyes narrowed, his frustration growing. Are you an idiot? The Hulk and Bruce Banner are one and the same. If Bruce has given himself up to the state government, it's natural that the Hulk is included. The web-slinger couldn't help but smile under his mask, a plan forming in his mind. Hulk, buddy. Are you and Bruce the same person? Spider-Man called out, raising his voice over the chaos. The Hulk, still trying to keep his rage in check with Betty's calming presence, growled before shouting back, no. Hulk is Hulk. Hulk hates puny Banner. Puny Banner weak and pathetic. Spider-Man turned back to Ross with a smirk that could almost be felt through the mask. See. Different people. The Hulk and Bruce Banner are two different people. Ross sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose in annoyance. He could feel his patience wearing thin. You truly know how to get under people's nerves. Do you truly expect to make it out alive after facing the entire US military and becoming an enemy of the state? All for this monster you don't even know. Hulk growled again, clearly irked by being repeatedly called a monster, but Betty's gentle touch kept him grounded. Her presence was the only thing keeping the Hulk from losing control entirely. Spider-Man didn't flinch, didn't hesitate as he looked Ross straight in the eyes. Without a doubt in my mind, he answered confidently. Ross's face hardened, any remaining trace of hesitation gone. I see. I guess we share the same thoughts then. Since I don't possess a single doubt either. Men, take them down. Rescue my foolish daughter from the hands of this villain. From this moment forward, they're an enemy of the United States of America and are to be dealt with extreme prejudice. With that, the order was given. Helicopters roared to life, tanks rumbled forward, and soldiers charged ahead, weapons drawn and ready to unleash a torrent of destruction. Firestar, Nightwing, disable their weapons. Silver, Red, web down the aircrafts. Ghost, take care of the heavy vehicles. Spider-Man ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. On it, they all shouted in unison, a determined grin spread across each of their faces as they charged forward. What about Hulk? The giant green future Avenger asked, eager for action. Spider-Man quickly glanced at him. Keep Betty safe. If any bullets or heavy weapons get through, it's your job to shield her. And keep an eye on the abomination. If he wakes up, take him down again. Hulk nodded, rising from where he'd pinned the abomination, and moved to stand protectively behind Betty, his massive form shielding her completely. With a grunt of affirmation, he gave Spider-Man a thumbs up, then focused his watchful eyes on his unconscious foe. Firestar and Nightwing surged ahead with Ghost Spider trailing close behind, their swift movements a blur of coordinated assault. As bullets and rockets rained down, Firestar shot forward, her body radiating intense heat. She unleashed a wave of searing energy that melted the projectiles in midair, leaving the enemy's weapons glowing with residual heat. "Now this is what I call a bonding moment," Firestar quipped, executing a graceful barrel roll, her smirk evident in her tone. Nightwing became a streak of motion, disarming opponents and dismantling weapons with lightning speed. His Eskrima sticks crackled with green electricity, a mere flick of his wrist enough to shatter helmets and knock soldiers unconscious. He moved effortlessly, flipping adversaries with a quick swipe, leaving a trail of chaos in his wake. "I'm not sure if fighting an army qualifies as a bonding moment, but I see the appeal," Nightwing replied, his voice laced with dry humor as he continued to take down enemies with ease. Ghost Spider suddenly propelled herself into the sky, flipping upside down as her eyes turned an icy blue. The air around her chilled instantly, frost forming as she exhaled a visible breath. Suspended in midair, she unleashed a flurry of webs, each one aimed with perfect precision toward the vehicles below. The sheer speed of her web-slinging made her appear like a turret, her every move calculated. As she descended gracefully, Ghost Spider landed upright, standing amidst a vast web that immobilized every vehicle caught in its intricate design. She released a burst of her chi, sending cold energy through each and every thread she unleashed, freezing the cars, tanks, and other heavy machinery solid. "Freeze. None of you are going anywhere today," she declared, her posture elegant and commanding as she stood among the frozen battlefield. Meanwhile, Scarlet Spider and Spider-Cat were reveling in their task along the canyon walls. They swung in tandem, weaving a massive web between the rocks and pulling in helicopters like they were trapping flies. Spider-Cat clung to the underside of one helicopter, shooting webs toward the canyon walls and constructing a large, centralized web to ensnare it. "Looks like I just caught lunch for the day," she exclaimed, her excitement contagious. Scarlet Spider snared two helicopter propellers with her webs, yanking them together into the sprawling web they'd created. "I think this is what they call a honey trap, right?" she said, glancing over at Felicia with a playful smile. Spider-Man just spread his arms out slightly, as if saying, "Look at all of this, I believe in chess this is what they call a checkmate. And now I'm supposed to ask you, what's your next move?" Spider-Man said teasingly, looking at the general expression as veins protruded from his forehead and his eyes turned red from the veins popping out as well. "You see, Ross, the last thing you want to do is make an enemy out of me. I barely moved a muscle during this whole exchange and I seem to have won. So let me ask you this, is declaring me an enemy of the state truly a wise move? Or do you perhaps want to rethink your foolish decision?" Spider-Man said as he continued to taunt. Chapter 169, Chapter 169, Third Person's POV. Seeing that most of the situation was under control, Spider-Man had a thought as he observed Ross' angered expression. "Even though I know S.H.I.E.L.D. is mostly infiltrated by Hydra, it might be best to hand over the Abomination to Fury. The Abomination would be too high profile for Hydra to take without Fury or anyone else noticing, which could lead to them getting caught. So, it's safer to keep him with S.H.I.E.L.D. There's really no safe option. It feels like I'm choosing the lesser of two evils. And the fact that I'm even considering Hydra as the better option says a lot about Ross. I can't take Abomination with me, I have nowhere to hold him, and I'd be charged with kidnapping. Besides, I don't even think I can undo the transformation." Not even a millisecond had passed since Spider-Man had taunted Ross. Ross was about to say something, but Spider-Man placed a finger over Ross' lips, stunning him. "Shoo, I'm making a call. Hey, Arachnid, first bring the Weaver, then call Papa Fury for me, please," Spider-Man said, tapping the side of his helmet with his other hand. He turned his head to the side, completely ignoring Ross, as if he wasn't there, while still keeping his finger over Ross' lips. Ross began turning so red with anger that Spider-Man wondered if he was about to turn into the Red Hulk from sheer rage. Ross swung a fist in a body shot toward Spider-Man, but Spider-Man swatted his hand away before it could connect. "Hello." Fury answered, sounding confused. Ross kept swinging, trying to hit Spider-Man, but Spider-Man easily blocked and deflected all his attempts with one hand. "Yo. Nicky J." Spider-Man exclaimed enthusiastically, slapping Ross' fists away. "How the hell did you get my private number? You've got 5 seconds before I hang up and change it." "Well, the thing is, I need your help. I'm sure you're aware of what happened in Harlem. We need a place to contain the abomination. I thought the US military had that covered. Fury questioned. Don't play games with me right now, Mr. Spy. We both know Ross isn't equipped to hold the abomination, and we both know I'm not talking about physically. If I leave the abomination in Ross' hands, a lot of people will suffer the consequences. He'd be safer with you, which is why I'm calling. So, will you come? Yeah, don't worry, I'll handle it. But you're putting me in a tough spot here. The military will be breathing down our asses, demanding we hand him over. Then talk to the president. Come to an agreement with him. Although S.H.I.E.L.D. is an independent organization, it's still secretly part of the government. If you're holding him, so are they. You can use that in your argument. All right, I see where you're going with this. I'm on my way, Fury said before hanging up. Meanwhile, Ross was huffing and puffing for air. He reached into his side holster, pulled out his pistol, and began shooting. Spider-Man's hands blurred as he caught each bullet, letting out a sigh. Man, I love that guy, Spider-Man said with an affectionate shake of his head. He then dropped down, sweeping Ross's legs out from under him, making him tumble to the ground. Spider-Man quickly shot his webs, binding Ross tightly. No matter how much he struggled, Ross couldn't move. Release me. You're making a terrible mistake. You're making an enemy out of me. I'll get you for this, Spider-Man. Aha. Finally. Spider-Man celebrated with a fist pump. Ghost Spider landed gracefully next to Spider-Man and looked at him in confusion. What are you celebrating? I've always wanted someone to shout, I'll get you for this, Spider-Man, since I first started. And it's finally happened. I couldn't be happier. You get happy over the weirdest things, I swear, Ghost Spider said, shaking her head. Father, the Weaver has arrived, Arachnid informed him. They both then made their way toward the Hulk, where Betty was peeking out as the gunfire had stopped. Hulk! Spider-Man called out. The Hulk turned to look at him. Why don't you come with us? Spider-Man asked, causing the Hulk to point at himself in confusion as the others joined them. Hulk doesn't belong anywhere. Hulk is best alone. And how lonely have you been because of it? Hulk let out a gruff sound at the question. Hulk isn't lonely, he said in a low voice. Of course not, you always had Banner with you. Puny Banner isn't Hulk's friend. Puny Banner hates Hulk, so Hulk hates Puny Banner. Hulk said, almost like a child throwing a tantrum. Betty was surprised to hear this. They really are two different people then. Are you really planning on inviting him to our hideout? Nightwing asked, his voice laced with concern. Yeah, don't worry about it, I trust him, Spider-Man replied with a confident nod. Trust him? We literally just met him, Spider-Cat said, looking at Spider-Man with confusion. And we're already best friends, right, Hulk? Spider-Man said, crossing his arms and nodding as if it were obvious. Hulk tilted his head in confusion. Hulk's friend. Yup. And I want to help you. When you're with me, you won't need to be on the run. We can help you out with whatever you need, Spider-Man said, still nodding. Nightwing leaned over and whispered, are you sure this is a good idea? Once you start paying rent and the bills, then you can worry about who we bring in, Spider-Man shot back with a grin. Nightwing gave him a straight look and rolled his eyes. Spider-Man turned to the others. What do you guys think? Scarlet Spider was the first to respond. She jumped up and landed on Hulk's shoulder. I say we bring him along. He seems nice, she said, patting his head. Spider-Cat leaped onto Hulk's other shoulder. I agree. It could be fun. Plus, we might finally have someone who can beat P.E. Spider-Man, she added, catching herself before almost revealing his identity. Well, he's certainly fascinating. I don't see any problem with having him around, Ghost said, studying Hulk thoughtfully with a hand on her chin. I'm mostly curious about how strong you really are, Nightwing said, eyeing Hulk with interest. Hulk is the strongest. Hulk roared, flexing his massive muscles. Haha, I don't doubt that, Nightwing replied, amused by Hulk's enthusiasm. Does my opinion even matter at this point? I mean, I just joined, after all, Firestar said awkwardly. Spider-Man's expression grew serious as he nodded. Of course it matters. You're already part of our team, so we value what you have to say. Eh? Really? Oh, wow, Firestar said, rubbing the back of her head, slightly embarrassed. Well, Hulk fought on our side today, so I say it's okay, she added, giving a thumbs up. Spider-Man nodded. See, Hulk? With that, you're officially part of the Spider family. Hulk rubbed the back of his head, still a bit confused. So Hulk goes with you. Hulk won't be hunted. I can't promise that 100%, but I can promise to protect you and do my best to keep you safe from being hunted down, Spider-Man assured him. Hulk doesn't need protection. Hulk's the strongest. Hulk declared proudly. All right, bring her down. Arachnid, Spider-Man ordered as a jet decloaked and descended to the ground, its hatch already open. When will I see you again? Betty asked, looking at the Hulk with sadness in her eyes. Betty won't come with Hulk. Hulk rumbled sadly, his voice low and mournful. It's to keep you safe. Being with me, the General's daughter, wouldn't do you any good, Betty replied with a self-deprecating smile. You know, you can come with us too, Spider-Man interjected. I kind of assumed you were a package deal, so I didn't ask earlier. My bad. Eh? You want me to come along? Betty asked, pointing at herself in surprise. It's mostly for Hulk's sake so he won't be lonely. What do you say, Hulk? Spider-Man asked. Bring Betty with Hulk. Betty Hulk's friend. Hulk said, a touch of celebration in his voice. Betty couldn't help but smile softly at his words. Ross, still tied up, heard Hulk's response and saw the jet in the distance. Betty. You better not do what I think you're going to do. Come and release me this instant. Am I not your father? Your family? Would you really betray me for that monster? Betty's expression grew conflicted as she looked between her father and the Hulk. She stared into Hulk's green, subdued eyes, then steeled herself. She stepped away from the Hulk and turned to face Ross. I'm a grown woman, capable of making my own decisions. Your choices led you to where you are now. It's time I make some decisions of my own and I choose the men I want to love, Betty declared firmly, making her stance clear. Betty. Get back here this instant. I am your father. Betty. Ross yelled, struggling against his bindings as he watched Betty turn her back on him and walk toward the Hulk. Suddenly, a large helicarrier loomed overhead, casting a vast shadow over the scene. Before long, Fury arrived as his S.H.I.E.L.D. agents used jets to carry the Abomination towards the helicarrier. Where's Natasha or Clint? Spider-Man asked, shielding his eyes as he looked around. They're in the middle of their own mission, Fury replied, watching the Abomination being secured. Really? Sending two of your best agents away at the same time? Not the smartest move, is it? Spider-Man remarked, shaking his head. I can take care of myself just fine. I don't need your concern, Fury shot back before turning to face Spider-Man, and shouldn't you be on your way? Why are you still here? Just making sure everything's properly taken care of. Wow, you really don't want me around, huh? That honestly kind of hurts. You'd be more tolerable if you weren't the way that you are, Fury quipped. Anyway, what are you going to do about him? He asked, nodding toward the Hulk as he boarded the jet with Betty and the others. Try to help him out while keeping him away from people as best I can. That's why I'm taking Betty with us. I'm hoping she'll be able to calm him down if he ever gets too angry. I see. So, she's the key to keeping him in check, Fury mused, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Spider-Man rolled his eyes, already sensing where Fury's thoughts were heading. Look, I need to go. Call if you need anything, you've got my number, he said, before turning into a streak of lightning and zipping into the jet. Fury watched with a scoff as the jet blasted off. A small smirk crept onto his face but was quickly wiped away as he turned back to his men. What is General Ross still doing tied up? Untie him. Chapter 170, Third Person's POV. As they flew on the Weaver, Betty turned towards the Hulk, who was simply sitting on the floor with his hands resting on his knees. Ah, Hulk. Can I talk to Bruce for a moment, please? Betty asked, carefully wording her question so as not to upset him. There is no need for puny banter. Hulk is all that matters, he scoffed. Betty placed her hands gently on his large ones. Please, she said, giving him a pleading look. Hulk wanted to refuse again, but he faltered at her earnest gaze. His shoulders slumped in defeat as he let out a grumble, fine. Hulk shall retreat for now. Just because Hulk's friend asked. Thank you, Betty said graciously. The Hulk grumbled some more before he began to shrink, his anger long since past, leaving him stubbornly clinging to control. It wasn't long before Bruce sat where the Hulk had been, shirtless, with pants comically too oversized for him. His eyes were foggy, still disoriented from the transformation. To his surprise, he was tackled to the ground as Betty wrapped her arms around him. Bruce, she shouted, tears in her eyes. Ah. Betty. Where are we? Greetings, Earthlings, Spider-Man said, walking towards Bruce with the Spock hand sign, mimicking an alien's voice. You are in our mothership, where we have decided to take you to our home planet, Arachnia, for further investigation. Nightwing and the others had to turn away to stop themselves from laughing. Even Betty had an amused expression, while Bruce looked shocked. Wha, are you serious? Nah, man, I'm just messing with you. You should have seen your face, Spider-Man said, lowering his hands and speaking normally. Bruce let out a sigh of relief, while Betty giggled in amusement. Arachnia. That's absolutely brilliant. How did you even come up with that? Spider-Cat asked, laughing. It was literally on the fly, Spider-Man smirked. I still don't understand what's going on, Bruce said awkwardly, looking at Betty. Betty didn't answer. She simply grabbed his face and kissed him deeply. Oh. Spider-Man said, covering his mask's eyes and turning around. We'll give you guys some privacy. When Betty let go, Bruce just sat there, stunned, not knowing how to react. Betty returned to hugging him. Oh, Bruce, I'm so glad you're all right. Yeah, don't worry, I'm fine, Bruce reassured her, then turned towards Spider-Man and the others. Now, for real, what is going on? Well, the Hulk and I became really good friends, and he agreed to join us. We were hoping to help you out with your problem. Help me out? Help me out how? Because trust me, I've tried everything in my power to get rid of this thing, and nothing's worked. The last help I got involved someone experimenting with my blood and creating another version of my problem. So forgive me if I'm not very receptive to what you have to offer, Bruce said, a bit suspiciously. Bruce, you can trust them, Betty said, trying to reassure him. What? Why should I? I don't even know them, Bruce replied, looking at Betty in confusion. Because they're heroes. Helping people is what they do. They want to help you, too. Heroes? Seriously? Is that why they're wearing ridiculous outfits? Bruce asked, raising an eyebrow. Oi! Spider-Man exclaimed, offended. Not cool, dude, Nightwing said, shaking his head in disapproval. We should throw you off this jet for your words alone, Spider-Cat scoffed, glaring at him. I thought we looked nice, though. Scarlet Spider mumbled, looking herself over. Bruce, don't be mean. They're good people trying to help you, Betty said, giving him a disapproving look. Bruce sighed. Look, I'm sure you mean well, but even the military is supposed to be the good guys who help, and look how that turned out. So if I come off a little hostile, it's because I can't be sure what your objectives are. At least with the military, I know what they're after. But you guys? Nada. I don't know who you guys are, your objectives, and what you benefit from helping me out. I'm sorry, but I simply cannot trust. They all remained silent, understanding where Bruce was coming from. He had been hurt too many times and had lost faith in people's goodwill. Spider-Man nodded towards Bruce. I understand. Spider-Man walked up to Bruce, sat down in front of him, crossed his legs. He reached up, took off his mask, and revealed his face to Bruce. What the hell are you doing? The others shouted in shock, unable to believe what they were seeing. Betty's eyes widened, as did Bruce's. You. How old are you? Bruce asked, taken aback by how young Peter looked. My name is Peter Parker. I'm 15 years old. And Bruce Banner, I want to help you, Peter said, looking straight into Bruce's eyes with a serious expression. Everyone in the jet stood in stunned silence. Betty had her hands over her head. You're telling me New York's most famous and popular hero is literally a child? Peter. What are you doing? Are you sure about this? Ghost Spider asked in a serious tone, knowing how much Peter valued keeping his identity secret, and all the trouble he went through so no one would know. Yeah, Bruce wouldn't have accepted our help any other way. To gain his trust, I threw all my cards on the table. Peter nodded confidently, without a hint of regret. Why? Why do you want to help me so much? Bruce asked, surprised. Have you ever heard the term noblesse oblige? Are you serious? Bruce asked, recognizing the term, knowing what it meant and what it entailed. Peter nodded. When I took on the mantle of a hero and started parading myself as such, it became my duty and responsibility to help everyone I see suffering in front of me, to help those in need who can't help themselves. And Bruce Banner, when I look into your eyes, all I see is a man who knows nothing but suffering. So it's my responsibility and duty to help you. Bruce couldn't help but chuckle. So you want to help me because it's your responsibility, huh? Bruce couldn't help but find it admirable that a kid had such a deep sense of responsibility. Peter turned toward the others and gave an awkward smile. Sorry for being selfish, guys. Nightwing didn't hesitate as he reached for his mask and took it off. Nah, we all signed up for this when we decided to be heroes. Noblesse oblige, right? Then it's my duty as well. If this is the only way, who am I to judge? Betty was taken aback again, seeing Harry's face. She looked around the room and, with a serious expression, asked, Are every single one of you just teenagers? They all sighed and reached for their masks, removing them as well, following Peter's and Harry's example. This is insane, Betty said, looking at them with a serious expression, her voice trembling with emotion. You are all children. You shouldn't be going through this. You should be spending your childhood having fun, not worrying about responsibilities, not worrying about saving the life of another or putting your own lives at risk. The room fell silent, the weight of Betty's words sinking in. Each of them understood the gravity of what she was saying, but they also knew they couldn't turn away from the path they had chosen. Okay, so how do you expect to help me? Bruce asked, seeing how serious Peter was. He had just exposed his identity, something they clearly valued greatly, so the least he could do was hear him out. Actually, could that wait? Spider-Man asked. Bruce looked at him in confusion. Why? We're now over Harlem, where the fight officially began. We made quite a mess of the place, and we need to clean it up. I hope you don't mind waiting, Peter said awkwardly, grabbing his helmet. Actually, can you do me a favor? At the college, there's a room filled with my blood. Can you destroy it so it doesn't get into the wrong hands? Bruce asked, to which Peter nodded. The others put their masks back on as the hatch opened, and they all rushed out to the destroyed city block. Betty and Bruce were left alone in the jet. Betty sighed as she leaned back against the wall next to where Bruce was sitting. You seem really affected by the fact that they're children. Bruce said, not knowing any other way to start a conversation. That's because you don't know who they are, Bruce. You've been in hiding, so you aren't aware of what they've done for the city. Especially Spider-Man and Ghost Spider, the girl in the white spider costume, Betty clarified. They're good people who've helped everyone they could. People love them and look up to them. Even though they receive some hate for what they do, they don't let it stop them. It sounds like you look up to them. Bruce said curiously. That's because I did. Honestly, finding out they're just kids doing what they believe is right makes me admire them even more. To choose the life they have takes a lot of courage. Their identities have always remained a mystery, so for them to reveal themselves to you just because they want to help you is something you should really appreciate, Betty sighed. Just how much did I miss by being away and in hiding? Bruce asked awkwardly. Betty smiled and nudged him. Don't worry, I'll fill you in on everything you've missed. Aren't I lucky? Bruce smirked. Please don't have intercourse in the vehicle. The sudden voice caused them to jump and look around cautiously. Hello. Betty called out, as it was a voice she hadn't heard before. Hello to you too, Ms. Betty Ross, and Dr. Bruce Banner. Wait, are you this ship's AI? Bruce asked, as that seemed the most logical explanation for the sudden voice. An observant one, aren't you? Guilty as charged. The name is Arachnid, you may refer to me as Arya, she said proudly, appearing as a holographic projection. Ah, you look so adorable, and what can we do for you? Betty said, looking at Arya, who appeared in her own hero costume. I've come to give you a warning, Arya said, her voice turning serious. Father is way too trusting sometimes, and I believe what he just did was very reckless. I'm here to warn you not to even think of betraying the trust he has put in you both by revealing his identity, or there will be consequences to be paid. Although they knew they should be taking her seriously with the threats she was making, they couldn't help but find it difficult due to how cute she appeared and sounded. Bruce was mostly surprised. You seem like a sophisticated AI. You have feelings, emotions, and act independently from your creator, who I'm guessing is Peter Parker, as he referred to him as father. Arya put a hand on her hips. But of course. My father is a genius, he was able to make someone as great as I am, she said, puffing her chest out and lifting her chin high. Seeing how loyal she is to her creator, I guess we don't have to worry about her going rogue. Not that it really matters. But it does mean that this Peter Parker is an intelligent individual, even at just 15 years old. Maybe, just maybe, he could really help me out. Bruce couldn't help but sigh outwardly. I'm seriously getting hopeful that a kid is going to be the one to help me.